Alright everyone, there is nothing quite like the comfort of being safe inside your own home. Tonight, we are leaving that safety behind. We're diving into a compilation of unexplained park ranger disappearances and deep woods anomalies that will make you grateful for the walls around you. So get cozy, and let's go. Park ranger gone missing in park is the ultimate irony. It's like a librarian getting lost in the fiction section, or a fish drowning, or me finally crossing that 100 views barrier. Today, we are going to look closely at the strange, completely unexpected disappearances of the individuals you would least expect to vanish in the wild. Park rangers. It's not unusual for casual hikers or everyday outdoorsmen to get lost in the deep woods. But when the people who actually work there end up missing, that's when you've got yourself a cold case. Or worse. Grab a bottle of something strong, get comfy, and let's go. Ranger Randy Morganson. In July of 1996, Ranger Randy Morrison was working as a backcountry ranger at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. At that specific time, he was the most experienced ranger in the High Sierras, having spent 28 years patrolling the backwoods. On this particular day, July 21st, 1996, Randy loaded his pack and went out on a routine patrol of his station. He was 64 years old. His health was nearly perfect. In fact, some of his co-workers genuinely thought he was invincible, entirely impervious to the perils that came with the job. It was right around daybreak when he headed out to patrol near Bench Lake, carrying nothing with him but an old ski pole to use as a hiking stick. He was never seen or heard from again. Now, as is so often the case in these strange disappearances, a sudden rainstorm blew up out of nowhere. The downpour completely erased any potential footprints or physical evidence pointing to where Ranger Randy could have possibly gone, or what might have happened to him. Over the following days, search teams faced intense frustration. Tracking dogs followed scents that seemed to abruptly stop dead in their tracks. Random pieces of gear turned up in several different locations, though none could be positively linked to Randy. An infrared-equipped helicopter picked up the thermal signature of a campfire burning on a hillside, but there was nobody in sight tending it. Eventually, the active search was called off with no sign of Randy or his body. Then, a letter arrived at the home of Randy and Judy Morganson in Sedona, Arizona. It was from Randy. Judy opened the envelope and noted it had been postmarked 2 days after his apparent disappearance. Since there is no postal service inside the national park, Judy could not comprehend how Randy could have mailed the letter. It naturally intensified suspicions that he had simply left the area to start a completely new life away from the National Park Service. 13 days after Randy had been reported missing, in early August of 1996, the official search, which utilized helicopters, specialized dog teams, and dozens upon dozens of volunteers, was officially terminated. Not a single trace of Randy had been found, not even a footprint. Finally, in July of 2001, 5 years after the search was called off, a 19-year-old member of a California Conservation Corps trail-building crew stepped off trail and stumbled upon human remains. The worker located new evidence near a creek within a gorge in the Widow Peak drainage, right near the outermost borders of the original search zone, below the pools of a waterfall. Rangers were immediately called in to search the site. They quickly discovered a tattered shirt with Morganson's official badge still attached. Next, they found a backpack with its buckle securely fastened, along with a boot. Close examination of that single boot, which sat half submerged in the water, revealed something white protruding from inside, a human leg bone. The boot and pack seemed to perfectly match the description of the gear that Randy was reportedly using on that final day. Investigation and recovery teams flew into the area. Shortly after their arrival, they discovered a functioning, park-issued radio resting right on top of the falls, not at the bottom with the rest of the evidence. Remarkably, it was turned to the on position. This particular discovery confused matters even more. While these remains confirmed Randy had been in the mountains the entire time, investigators could not say for certain if this was where he actually died. Rangers remembered searching this exact gorge and crossing at the precise spot where the radio was found years prior. Retired Sierra Subdistrict Ranger Alden Nash believes Morganson likely fell through a temporary snow bridge, broke his leg, and his body remained concealed beneath the ice throughout the entire 1996 search effort. Weirdly enough, during that initial 1996 rescue attempt, Randy's wife Judy had dreamed of a dead man floating in a lake. "I do not think it was an accident," states Eric Blam, author of The Last Season, a book detailing the disappearance of Randy Morganson. Blim suggests Randy may have wanted to appear to have died on the job just to ensure Judy, who was still his wife at the time, received government benefits. a policy that would be denied in the event of someone taking their own life. If he wanted to throw off tracking dogs or deceive people into believing an accident occurred, Blim notes he did an exceptional job. After so many years of elemental exposure and animal activity, there is simply no way to determine exactly what happened to the bones. The National Park Service eventually named a peak in memory of Randy, the unofficial Mount Morrison. Situated just west of Mount Russell and north of Mount Whitney, this peak stands as a monument. It should be distinguished from the west peak of Mount Russell, the higher of the Russell twin summits, which are only separated by 1/10 of a mile. A formal summit register bearing the name Mount Randy Morganson at an elevation of 13,920 feet was carried to the top by 2 park veterans in 2007. A climber named Richard Padowski found the original register missing when he climbed Mount Morganson on June 20, 2008. He placed a temporary one that day, making a massive effort to return to the summit 1 week later with a weatherproof ammunition can and a replacement journal. Today, barely a handful of people sign it each year. Ranger Ralph W. Heath. Ralph W. Heath was a dedicated park ranger at Baxter State Park in Maine, located in the United States, who allegedly died of exposure while attempting to rescue a woman lost on Mount Katahdin in 1963. On Monday, October 28th of that year, 2 women named Helen Moore and Margaret Ibisick, both traveling from Concord, Massachusetts, took the Cathedral Trail and climbed Baxter Peak on the mountain. They reached the summit and paused to eat lunch at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. When the 2 friends decided to start their hike again and head back down, a small argument arose regarding the route. Helen wanted to return exactly the way they had come up. Margaret, however, wanted to bushwhack, which basically means leaving the marked established trail to travel completely off the beaten path. Helen recognized the immense risk involved. Even though Margaret possessed slightly more hiking experience than she did, though not by much, only 3 years total, Helen deemed it far too dangerous. She walked away to take the Dudley Trail, which was the original trail they had used to get up there in the first place, leaving her friend to make her own mistakes and go her own way. It was a choice she would later deeply regret. Margaret, thinking she was taking a convenient shortcut, laughed off her friend's warnings and went her separate way, agreeing to meet later at the Chimney Pond lean-to shelter. When Helen reached the final destination and saw there was no sign of Margaret, she decided to wait. Her worry grew rapidly. Though the day had started out pleasant and sunny, a severe nor'easter storm was blowing in, and the mountain weather was about to take a sudden turn for the worse. Helen began shouting for Margaret near the head wall toward the mountain itself. To her relief, she heard her friend respond and started calling back, despite the fact that Margaret was asking for help. Margaret yelled that she was not injured but was entirely stuck in treacherous terrain, unable to move forward or climb back up. She pleaded with Helen to bring assistance. This is when Helen rushed to the ranger station, where she encountered Ranger Ralph Heath having dinner. After listening to the situation, Ralph immediately understood the danger of that specific path and how serious a problem they had. In his mind, however, he was thanking his lucky stars for one detail. There was no snow on the ground yet. In almost any other year he could recall, snow would have blanketed the mountain for weeks by late October. Ralph accompanied Helen back toward Chimney Point, shouting out into the darkness toward Margaret. In a calm, steady voice, he instructed her to stay exactly where she was and avoid moving. Help was on the way. With the winds intensifying, Ralph knew the situation could shift from a standard rescue to a fatal scenario in mere seconds. He had to act fast. He escorted Helen back to safety at the ranger station and radioed his supervisor, Phelim Taylor, reporting a stranded hiker in the upper basin. To understand Ralph Heath, you have to look at his background to see what a brave man he truly was. He served in World War II and received an honorable discharge. Later, a devastating house fire destroyed everything he owned but the clothes on his back, including his discharge papers. Before anyone could verify his prior service, he was drafted again to serve in the Korean War. Without hesitation, Ralph went to serve his country a second time. Sadly, his wife chose not to endure another military tour, especially one he should have been exempt from, and filed for divorce. This was a man who sought peace and solitude in his life after immense tragedy, and he deeply loved his work as a ranger. Despite the worsening weather and direct orders from his supervising ranger to wait until daylight, Ralph decided the danger to Margaret was too immediate to leave her exposed overnight. Heavy snow was imminent. He chose to attempt a solo rescue in the dark. Borrowing Helen's backpack, he packed it with essentials: food, a sleeping bag, water, a parka, and extra clothing. He grabbed 80 feet of rope and at 11 p.m. that night headed out alone down Dudley Trail. 5 hours later at 4 in the morning, he checked back in with Helen. He told her he had spoken to Margaret an hour after heading out and confirmed her location. He had repeated his instructions for her to stay put. Margaret confirmed she was uninjured but suffering from the extreme cold. She was likely terrified. Ralph told Helen that Margaret was positioned near the waterfall, and he could not safely reach her without additional personnel and more rope. This particular area was so hazardous that even experienced ice climbers considered it treacherous. Ralph was deeply concerned because Margaret was panicking, refusing to stay put, and determined to find her own way down out of fear of freezing to death before help arrived. After updating Helen, Ralph contacted his supervisor, Phelan Taylor. Taylor immediately dispatched the Maine Forest Service, 2 additional park rangers, and a state game warden. By 6 in the morning on Tuesday the 29th, an icy rain began to fall as winds intensified. Ralph ate his breakfast and informed Helen of his next move. He planned to ascend the ravine from Chimney Pond, climb directly up the head wall into the waterfall, and reach Margaret to provide shelter and comfort. Even if he could not extract her alone, he could keep her safe and calm until the backup teams arrived. He was knowingly placing himself at extreme risk, but he went anyway. He was a true hero. The plan was technically sound, and despite being a heavy smoker, Ralph was in excellent physical condition. However, he had hiked Dudley Trail 4 times in the previous 24 hours. He was thoroughly exhausted and desperately needed rest. This would be an entirely off-trail, technical climb. Yet, he refused to abandon Margaret, so the warnings from his co-workers fell on deaf ears. Ralph reached Margaret just as the outer bands of Hurricane Jenny struck the mountain. The two hunkered down together. Meanwhile, a ranger sergeant attempting to reach Chimney Pond on foot reported total whiteout conditions and gale-force winds by the time he reached the basin. By noon, deep snow rendered the trailheads completely impassable, even for 4-wheel drive vehicles. 18 inches of snow had accumulated, and it was falling fast. The sergeant reported that his own clothing had frozen solid and cracked at the elbows halfway up the mountain. Zero visibility and merciless winds forced him back down. He knew Ralph and Margaret were in grave danger, completely cut off from rescue. The following morning, Wednesday, October 30th, 1963, Warden Supervisor David Priest established an incident command center at Roaring Brook, keeping at least 35 personnel working around the clock. Every possible rescue avenue was explored, but the rapidly accumulating snow blocked all progress. By Friday morning, November 1st, it had been 5 days since Margaret became stranded and 4 days since Ralph joined her. On Saturday, November 2nd, search coordinators reluctantly concluded that further rescue efforts were futile and risking more lives was unjustified. William Lowe Putnam III, one of the country's most experienced mountaineers who had been assisting since Friday, issued a statement on Sunday, November 3rd. He stated his belief that both Ralph and Margaret had likely perished on Tuesday, making further operations a waste of critical resources. It took nearly 6 months, until April of 1964, for recovery teams to locate Margaret Ibisick's body and bring her down. They required chemical salts to melt the ice surrounding her remains to avoid damaging them, an operation that took 3 additional days. An autopsy revealed Margaret had suffered severe trauma and survived only a few hours due to massive blood loss. Her official cause of death was exsanguination. 2 weeks later, on May 15th, they finally located Ralph's body. Oddly enough, he was found 400 feet above where Margaret had been positioned. He was airlifted out. His autopsy showed no signs of trauma or injury. The coroner concluded he had simply sat down and gone to sleep, a classic consequence of extreme hypothermia. Let us look at the facts here. If Margaret died within hours of becoming stuck due to a severed artery, how was she calling out to Ralph hours later? A severed leg artery causes fatal blood loss within minutes, yet she answered him and called out to Helen long after she initially became trapped. How is that possible? Neither woman was under duress or ill beforehand, ruling out hallucinations. No other bodies were found, and no one else ever came forward claiming to be the voice on the mountain. It is a strange phenomenon, but one that search and rescue personnel encounter surprisingly often. Hearing the distinct calls of the missing, but never being able to pinpoint the source, or the lost individual hearing rescuers, but never matching their location. The sudden, violent shift in weather is another recurring factor in wilderness disappearances. The day had started out warm and sunny, weeks late for any snow. Why it escalated so rapidly remains a mystery, but it is one of the core elements we analyze when examining these strange occurrences in our national parks. The silent signal. Well, a summer rescue mission high up in the mountains of Hokkaido was supposed to be strictly routine. But what the helicopter crew found that day was anything but ordinary. As the chopper skimmed over the Daisetsuzan National Park on July 24, 1989, searching for 2 missing hikers, the pilot spotted something astonishing on the ground below. Giant white letters, spelling out SOS, right in the middle of the green wilderness. The makeshift distress signal had been meticulously formed by birch tree trunks. Each was about 15 feet long. They were arranged specifically to catch the eye of anyone flying overhead. The crew immediately zeroed in. They soon located the lost hikers. Two men from Tokyo, found a couple of miles north of the mysterious sign. Relieved, the rescuers whisked the pair to safety. They naturally assumed the improvised SOS had been the handiwork of these very hikers. But as the helicopter team went over the site and congratulated them on their clever signal, the two men exchanged completely baffled looks. They had not made any sign at all. In that single moment, a routine rescue transformed. It became the start of one of Japan's most perplexing wilderness mysteries. The revelation sent a deep chill through the Hokkaido authorities. If the enormous SOS was not made by the rescued hikers, then who had put it there? The search team suddenly realized there might be another stranded person out there. Someone who had painstakingly arranged 19 heavy birch logs into a desperate plea for help, and never lived to see rescue. Due to fading daylight on the 24th, authorities had to wait until the next morning to investigate the area around the sign. On July 25th, a second search party returned to the remote mountainside. They were there to scour for clues near the giant letters. The sign lay on a marshy slope about 2 miles from Mount Asahidike's summit, not far from the headwaters of the Chubetsu River. It would not take long for them to discover that the silent symbol was indeed the harbinger of a profound tragedy. Scattered bones were soon found strewn near the wooden sign, confirming the team's absolute worst fears. The skeletal remains had been disturbed by animals. There were distinct bite marks on many of the fragments. More eerily, investigators noted that some bones were broken in ways suggesting the person had suffered serious injuries before death, possibly from a severe fall in the treacherous terrain. As the search expanded, police made another grim find. A small hole or crevice in the ground, just large enough for a person to huddle inside. It contained an abandoned backpack and assorted personal items. This hidden cache was essentially a time capsule from the past. Inside the pack were items that hinted at the identity and fate of the mystery victim. There were 2 cameras, a tripod, a notebook, a pair of men's basketball shoes, a couple of toothbrushes with toothpaste, and a portable tape recorder containing 4 cassette tapes. Perhaps most cruelly, there was also a driver's license. The name on the ID was Kenji Iwamura, a 25-year-old man from the city of Konan in Japan's Aichi prefecture. The discovery of Kenji Iwamura's belongings finally brought a sense of clarity to the bewildering situation. Police now had a probable name for the deceased camper. Kenji had actually gone missing 5 years earlier, in the summer of 1984. Back on July 10, 1984, Kenji set off alone. He was an office worker and an avid outdoorsman. He went on a hiking trip to Mount Asahidake. That is part of the very same national park where the SOS sign now lay. He was reportedly taking a week off after a recent job promotion to explore the scenic Hokkaido wilderness. Before heading into the dense mountains, Kenji checked in at a local lodge near the trail. Staff later recalled specifically warning him that the weather was turning foul. The route could be highly dangerous. They advised him to wait for better conditions. But the young hiker was eager. Undeterred, he departed for the climb despite the serious cautions, aiming to reach the summit against all odds. When Kenji failed to come back to the lodge or show up at work the next week, a missing person report was filed. Local police conducted extensive searches in 1980. At the time, they found no trace of him in the vast expanse of forested peaks. Kenji Iwamura seemed to have vanished into thin air. Now 5 years later, in 1989, it appeared that his final message had literally been spelled out on the mountainside. Tragically unnoticed for years, the giant SOS sign spotted by chance in the helicopter search had likely been built during Kenji's ill-fated excursion. It stood as a silent witness to his plight. Indeed, when authorities consulted old aerial photographs of the area, they discovered a haunting detail. The huge SOS had been fully visible in images dating back to at least September 1987. For at least 2 years prior to its 1989 rediscovery, the sign lay completely hidden in plain sight, undetected by other hikers or rangers. And yeah, you may have noticed I said possibly. This is exactly where things start getting really weird. With Kenji's ID and gear now in hand, investigators initially assumed the recovered bones were his. However, this case was about to take another incredibly bewildering turn. The skeletal remains were sent to Asahikawa Medical University for analysis. The first reports came back with an absolute shocker. The bones appeared to belong to a woman, approximately 20 to 40 years old. Kenji was male. So this finding raised deeply troubling questions. Did another person die alongside Kenji Iwamura? The media immediately latched onto the idea that an unidentified woman had perished there, fueling wild theories. Yet there were zero reports of a missing female hiker in the area. Everyone who knew Kenji vehemently insisted he had gone hiking alone. Faced with these totally perplexing findings, authorities turned their attention to the tapes recovered from Kenji's backpack. Perhaps they could shed some light on what happened in those agonizing final moments on the mountain. On July 27, 1989, a police team played the 4 cassettes, not knowing what they would hear. 3 of the tapes contained nothing unusual. They were filled with music, notably theme songs from popular 1980s anime TV shows. It later came out that Kenji was something of an otaku. He had carried those tapes with him on the hike. But it was the 4th tape that turned the entire investigation on its head. This cassette held a 2-minute and 17-second recording of a voice, a young man shouting in panicked Japanese. In the crackling audio, he is screaming SOS, begging for help over and over. He frantically explains that he is stuck on top of a cliff. He cannot move. The voice is painfully strained, desperate, echoing with the absolute hopelessness of someone who truly believes these might be his very last words. Hardened police officers listening to the tape were utterly haunted, hoping that rescuers might eventually find it. Yet the method was incredibly puzzling. A tape recorder is not a transmitter. So why record a plea for help that literally no one would hear in time? One theory was that Kenji had intended to use the recording in lieu of his physical voice if searchers came near. He planned to use it if he grew too weak to shout. Or maybe he did it just to leave it behind as a sort of metaphorical message in a bottle. Another possibility is that he simply left the recorder running by total accident. It captured his final cries without him even realizing it. To this day, we simply do not know for sure. The only thing certain is that the tape preserved a chilling moment in time. A young man alone on a mountainside calling out for salvation that would not arrive in time. Interestingly, when police played the tape for Kenji Iwamura's parents later on, the grieving family could not conclusively identify the voice as their son's. It is possible the intense agony and exhaustion had distorted his voice beyond recognition, or perhaps the voice might belong to someone else entirely. The tape's existence and the parents' doubt opened the door to yet more intense speculation. By early 1990, the case of the SOS sign had advanced somewhat, but many mysteries firmly remained unsolved. After re-examining the bone fragments, authorities corrected their earlier mistake. They concluded that all the remains actually belonged to one single person. Further, despite the earlier confusion, that person was male. In February 1990, the police formally announced that the skeleton was now definitively believed to be Kenji Iwamura. Yet if Kenji Iwamura died there in 1984, critical questions still lingered. How had a lone, critically injured man built an SOS sign of such massive magnitude? And if he did not build it alone, who helped him? The wooden letters on that slope were enormous. Each letter was roughly 10 to 16 feet across. They were composed of multiple heavy birch logs stacked 3 high. Analysis by forestry experts estimated it would take a strong, able-bodied person at least 2 days of punishing hard labor to assemble such a sign with the available timber. Kenji, however, was described in the autopsy as having a slight, thin build. So much so that the authorities had initially very confidently misgendered his remains. Simply put, Kenji was no strapping Japanese woodsman by any stretch of the imagination. Further, the injuries to his skeleton strongly suggest he had broken bones, injuries that would have left him incredibly weak or totally immobilized before he died. Building the huge SOS under those exact conditions would verge on the impossible, unless he had actually injured himself in the very process of making the sign. Furthermore, no axe or saw was ever found at the site. While the logs could have been deadfall already fallen trees, arranging them so neatly likely required cutting tools, or at least tremendous, monumental effort to drag into position. So how then did the SOS sign come to be? One leading theory suggests that Kenji Iwamura may not have been completely alone during his horrifying ordeal. Perhaps he crossed paths with another lost hiker on the mountain. In this scenario, after Kenji fell and injured himself, which explains the fractures in his remains, the other person tried and failed to carry him out of the steep ravine. Kenji, unable to walk, might have urged this companion to go find help before leaving. The unknown helper could have gathered birch logs to create a massive signal nearby, desperately hoping it would lead rescuers right back to Kenji. The theory continues that the companion then set off to seek rescue but never made it, perhaps falling victim to the elements as well, or turning back after getting completely lost. If this hypothetical Good Samaritan perished or failed to inform authorities, it would perfectly explain why no one ever came for Kenji. The Hokkaido police themselves considered this 2-person theory as a very strong possibility. It neatly accounts for the immense scale of the sign and the absence of a cutting tool. A healthier, strapping kind of fellow could have done the heavy lifting and chopping. It also might explain why Kenji's family did not recognize the frantic voice on the take. Conceivably, it could have been the other man's voice on the recording. However, this theory has one absolutely glaring hole. No evidence of a second person was ever found, no extra set of belongings, no second skeleton, no additional names in lodge logs or missing persons reports. Despite being highly plausible, it remains purely speculative. On the other hand, perhaps the simplest explanation is closer to the truth. Kenji Iwamura may have been far more resourceful and incredibly determined than anyone guessed. Despite his agonizing injuries, maybe he did manage to slowly drag and stack massive logs into an SOS sign over many punishing days, driven by sheer raw will to survive. Human beings in life or death situations have accomplished absolutely incredible feats of endurance and strength. In this version, everything at the site was essentially his doing. A solitary, heroic struggle against nature with a tragic ending. Officially, the case was closed. The formal conclusion stated that Kenji was alone and died due to a terrible accident in the wilderness. Yet even the police fully admitted that some aspects would forever remain unanswered. And remember how this story started out? Well, in a profoundly bittersweet twist of fate, his SOS sign actually did save lives. Just not his own. 5 years after Kenji disappeared, that weathered SOS ended up leading rescuers right to 2 lost hikers, bringing them home safely. This final act of desperation thus became an unintended beacon of hope for others. The mystery of Charles McCullough. Charles McCullough was a 19-year-old aspiring professional photographer from Virginia who embarked on an ambitious cross-country journey in 1974. His objective was clear: visit America's national parks and capture their vast wilderness landscapes through his camera lens. Friends and family knew him as a highly responsible young man who maintained regular contact and left detailed itineraries of his travels. By January of 1975, Charles had arrived in Eugene, Oregon, staying with a friend while organizing a brief winter excursion into Crater Lake National Park. On January 29, 1975, Charles left the apartment in Eugene, heading toward Crater Lake. He explicitly told his friend he expected to return by January 31st, and that if he was not back by February 1st, he should be reported missing immediately. Equipped with his camera, a distinctive orange backpack, and heavy winter attire, Charles boarded a Greyhound bus. The next day, January 30th, multiple witnesses spotted Charles in the Diamond Lake area, a resort region located roughly 45 minutes from Crater Lake along his intended route. A park ranger later confirmed he had given a ride to a young man matching Charles's exact description from Diamond Lake directly to the north entrance of Crater Lake on that very day. This ride made the ranger the final person confirmed to have seen Charles alive. The conditions inside the park were brutal. Over 5 feet of fresh snow had fallen in the preceding 2 weeks, leaving a thick layer of soft powder over an already dense snowpack. The north entrance road that Charles intended to hike was closed for the winter season, meaning he likely attempted to navigate it on foot or follow a snow-covered trail. Shortly after his arrival, a new storm struck the region, dropping approximately 3 feet of additional snow around the end of January. This downpour quickly buried any tracks and made foot travel exceptionally dangerous. When Charles failed to return to Eugene, his concerned friend notified the authorities on February 1, 1975. Local law enforcement and park officials were alerted to look out for the young photographer. The Oregon State Police distributed missing person posters across bus stations in Eugene, initially working under the assumption that he might have altered his travel plans without telling anyone. During the opening days of the investigation, officials found no solid leads. The harsh winter weather severely restricted search capabilities, as deep snow made ground searches nearly impossible throughout February. Initial patrols and aerial overflights yielded absolutely nothing within the park's accessible areas, leading some investigators to wonder if he had left the region entirely. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Charles's father, also named Charles, flew to Oregon to spearhead the search efforts. Determined to find his son, the elder Charles coordinated directly with park rangers and conducted extensive personal searches across Crater Lake's northern sector, focusing heavily on the area near the north entrance. Throughout the spring and summer of 1975, Charles's father essentially camped inside the park, organizing search parties and scouring the wilderness. Frustrated by the lack of progress, a family member wrote to United States Senator William L. Scott in March of 1976, complaining that the Federal Bureau of Investigation refused to assist. The Bureau responded that they lacked jurisdiction over a routine missing person case absent evidence of a kidnapping. After more than a year and a half without answers, a major breakthrough occurred in October of 1976. On October 13, 1976, 2 hikers from Texas were exploring a remote western section of Crater Lake National Park. Walking through a secluded, boggy canyon, they stumbled upon an old, weathered backpack. Assuming it was simply lost property, they carried it to park rangers the following day. Inside, the pack rangers discovered a set of keys, one of which matched a Volkswagen, the identical make of vehicle owned by Charles. This discovery immediately shifted the investigation. Park rangers organized an immediate ground search of the canyon where the pack had been recovered. On October 14, 1976, a mounted patrol located human remains scattered down a steep embankment deep within the wilderness. The remains were in an advanced state of decomposition and showed clear signs of disruption by local wildlife and the elements. Rangers recovered portions of a human skeleton, including a skull and a lower jawbone, near a creek bed. The recovery site sat roughly 5 to 6 miles from the nearest road and required a 12-mile hike by trail from the point where Charles had likely started his trek. To put it simply, this location was exceptionally deep within treacherous backcountry terrain. Because dental records had been secured early in the investigation, forensic teams quickly matched the teeth in the recovered skull to Charles's records, confirming his identity. Oregon State Police investigators joined park officials at the scene to search for additional evidence. Notably, several critical items were completely missing. Charles's wallet and his expensive camera gear were nowhere to be found. His coat, boots, and the larger bones of his arms, legs, and torso were also absent. Furthermore, the skeletal remains present showed no clear signs of physical trauma. Following an examination, authorities announced the probable cause of death as exposure to the elements. While the discovery brought the search to an official end, the case remained highly controversial. Park officials leaned heavily toward a tragic winter accident, proposing that Charles became caught in a severe storm, succumbed to hypothermia, and died while trying to navigate his way out. This theory aligns with several key facts. He lacked overnight survival gear for deep snow, and he did not have snowshoes or skis. In those conditions, a lone hiker can easily become exhausted and disoriented. Rangers noted that severe hypothermia can induce paradoxical undressing, where a freezing victim experiences a false sensation of extreme heat and removes their clothing. This could explain why his assignment of pants was found unbuckled and why his jacket was never recovered. Months of scavenging by animals easily explains the scattered, incomplete nature of the skeleton. However, the McCullough family and various outside observers openly challenged this official narrative. Charles's father never believed his son's death was a simple accident. He pointed directly to the complete absence of the expensive camera equipment and cash as a clear sign of foul play, suggesting someone may have robbed and harmed his son. Charles had been hitchhiking with valuable gear, leading to speculation that he was killed elsewhere and his remains dumped in that remote canyon. What keeps this case a lingering mystery is the sheer distance involved. Charles's bones were located roughly 12 miles from his likely starting point. This terrain is incredibly difficult under normal summer conditions. During a winter storm under feet of snow, experienced outdoorsmen assert it would be virtually impossible to cover that distance on foot without snowshoes or skis. How he ended up so far off course, deep inside a canyon that even park rangers rarely visited, remains completely unknown. Some speculate the only logical explanation is that he was transported into the backcountry by snowmobile. The total absence of his camera, an item an avid photographer would keep close until the very end, leaves an enduring question mark over what truly happened in the Oregon backcountry in 1975. The disappearance of Tom Messick. Well, on November 15, 2015, a wilderness trip that was supposed to be completely routine suddenly morphed into an absolute mystery. 82-year-old Tom Messick disappeared. He simply vanished during a deer hunting trip up in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. Messick was part of this tight-knit hunting party. 7 friends and family members. This was an outing they did annually for decades. It was tradition. That particular year, they actually chose to hunt near Lily Pond by Brant Lake. It is located in the town of Horicon, a spot they had not visited before. Because of his age and his health, Messick's role was basically to remain stationary. He was designated as a watch. He was sitting on a stump near an old logging road. The younger members of the party walked through the dense woods. Their goal was to drive deer toward him. The plan? They were going to regroup right around 2 p.m. But when the others finally returned to that meeting spot, Messick was nowhere to be found. Now, Messick did have some pretty significant health limitations. He had lost one eye in an accident. His hearing was poor, and he dealt with heart troubles. Yet he was a lifelong outdoorsman. He carried a hunting rifle and a walkie-talkie that day. He wore camouflage clothing. He also had on his distinctive red and black plaid hat. When he failed to show up at the rendezvous point, his companions immediately searched the surrounding area. They then contacted authorities that afternoon. Forest rangers arrived by 4:30 p.m. They scoured the woods until midnight. Nothing. They found absolutely no trace of the missing hunter. Basically, a completely routine outing had turned into a baffling wilderness mystery, one that persists to this day. In the days and weeks that followed, a massive search and rescue operation was launched around Lily Pond. They were desperate to look for any sign of Tom. It quickly became one of the most intensive searches the Adirondacks had seen in years. It covered roughly 29 square miles of incredibly difficult terrain in northern Warren County. At its absolute peak, more than 300 people were involved in the effort. Search teams utilized a massive range of resources. Specially trained search dogs were deployed. Their job was to track any lingering scent or clues hidden in the woods. State police helicopters conducted sweeping aerial passes over the forest canopy. Teams of divers plunged into Lily Pond along with other nearby waterways. Despite this completely exhaustive search, not a single piece of evidence was discovered. The operation continued for weeks. Ultimately, it lasted around 2 months in some form or another. Yet it turned up no sign of Messick, no sign of his belongings. Searchers found no footprints, no discarded clothing. There were no other clues to indicate what happened. Rescuers were left baffled. How could an elderly man vanish so completely without a trace? So with no leads from the search, the New York State Police took charge of the investigation. The disappearance was officially classified as an active missing person case. The State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation pursued any possible leads they could find. Investigators have kept the case open. As one state police investigator noted in a 2023 interview, missing persons cases are not closed until we figure out what happened, right? The unusual circumstances also drew attention from federal authorities. According to Messick's wife, FBI agents told her that something is not right about Tom's case. They did not share any specific theories, though. Without hard evidence, the FBI had no concrete explanation either. This really highlights how baffling the situation was, even to highly seasoned investigators. As time went on with zero answers, numerous theories and intense speculation emerged. One possibility was that Messick succumbed to a sudden medical emergency, like a heart attack. Or perhaps he became lost and died somewhere completely hidden from view. He might have wandered just far enough off his post that searchers somehow missed him. Or perhaps he fell into a natural crevice. Maybe an abandoned mine shaft concealed him. Another theory suggests something else. Perhaps Tom encountered an unknown person in the woods, or he was the victim of an accidental shooting or a collision that was subsequently covered up. His wife speculated that an ATV rider might have hit him. Panicking, this rider carried him out of the area. However, law enforcement found absolutely no hint of any crime or mishap during their extensive investigation, so this theory remains unsupported by physical evidence. Personally, despite the lack of any corroborating evidence, I think this is the most sensible theory to explain how he just dropped off the face of the earth, especially despite a massive investigation. After all, Tom Messick was not exactly in the best physical shape. He cannot have wandered too far from where he was posted. Perhaps a hunting party accidentally struck him with an ATV, or accidentally shot him. Then they made specific efforts to cover up the act. If the cover-up was thorough enough, the fact that the entire scene was not closed off immediately and treated as a location where foul play may have occurred, may have allowed crucial evidence to spoil. And that is not a knock at the investigators here. They immediately sprung into action. They began searching for Tom because they clearly believed this was a somewhat standard missing person case. The baffling lack of evidence also fueled more unusual ideas. Tom Messick's case has become a cornerstone of missing 411 videos on YouTube. These videos generally hypothesize that something otherworldly may have been at play. As evidence for this, one hunting partner actually reported hearing a strange, unidentified noise in the woods around the exact time Messick vanished. Notably, online investigators have also zeroed in on the fact that the FBI informed Tom's wife that something seemed very off about the case. The inference they take from this statement is entirely different from what his wife took out of it. While his wife assumed this referred to foul play, these online investigators took the statement to suggest the possibility of an extraterrestrial encounter. While some have criticized these amateur sleuths' intense focus on an unproven theory, I actually think it is very important to note that these theories have kept attention on Tom's case. I personally do not believe we need to resort to any supernatural explanations here, but the fact that millions of people have become aware of Tom Messick because of it is a very good thing. As I have said before throughout this series, the best way to keep the authorities investigating a case is to keep as much attention on the case as possible. The mystery on the mountain. Moving on. On a cold January night in 1987, 17-year-old Joe Helt set out with friends. This was in the small town of Ellenville, New York. He was never seen again. Helt was a typical teenager living in the Hudson Valley. He was known for his easygoing nature. He had a deep love of rock music. He lived with his mother and siblings in Ellenville, a quiet village nestled right below the Shawangunk Mountains. On Friday, January 16, 1987, Joe joined dozens of local teens. They were at a popular hangout at the abandoned Mount Cathalia ski lodge. It is located in the nearby hamlet of Cragsmoor. What began as a night of casual partying would soon turn into one of the region's most enduring mysteries. As the evening wore on at the crumbling ski lodge, Joe spent time mingling with friends. At one point, he got into a heated argument with three acquaintances: 21-year-old J.P. LaForge, 18-year-old Wade Marks, and 16-year-old Kelly Diaz. The conflict grew really intense. Witnesses later recalled other partygoers drifting away from them. People feared the dispute might actually become physical. Despite this serious tension, Joe eventually left the party with those exact same three people. He climbed into LaForge's Subaru for a late-night drive. The group decided to head up a mountain road toward Sam's Point. That is an area of Minnewaska State Park known for its icy caves and severely rugged terrain. In the early morning hours of January 17th, their car became hopelessly stuck in deep snow. This happened along a loop road by Lake Maratanza near the Sam's Point Preserve Gatehouse. The three friends later told police that around 3 a.m. Joe grew incredibly frustrated by their failed attempts to free the car. He declared he would just walk home. Ellenville was about 5 miles down the mountain, a long, punishing trek on a winter night for Joe, who was not wearing proper gear. According to the three friends, Joe set off alone into the darkness. They stayed behind. About 20 minutes later, Wade Marks and Kelly Diaz abandoned a stranded car as well. They started walking in the same direction to Marks's house, which was roughly 2 miles away. John LaForge told investigators he waited another 10 minutes by himself. Then he also trudged off to his home about 1.5 miles from the scene. It was below freezing. The middle of the night. The mountain was silent and dark. All three made it safely back to their respective homes. Joe Helt, however, never made it off the mountain. He vanished into the frigid wilderness, leaving absolutely no trace behind. When Joe failed to show up for work the next evening, his family finally realized something was very wrong. Joe's mother, Leanne, had initially assumed he had stayed over with friends after the party, but when his employer called saying Joe had not arrived for his shift, pure panic set in. Joe was not the sort of teenager who simply would not show up for work. The Ellenville police were notified on January 17th that the teen was missing. A massive search effort was launched that very night. State police, forest rangers, local police officers and volunteer firefighters, tracking dogs and even a helicopter crew mobilized to scour the mountainous area. For 6 days they combed the wilderness. They focused on the rocky trails, deep caves, and wooded ravines near the spot where Joe was last seen. It was not long before nature made the search even more difficult. A heavy winter storm swept into the region that weekend. It dumped over 2 feet of snow across the entire area. Blinding blizzards and massive snowdrifts impeded progress. This raised major fears that Joe, if lost and injured, could not have survived long in the brutal elements. After nearly a week of completely fruitless effort, with roads becoming impassable, officials had to suspend the active search. When spring finally arrived and the snow melted, search teams returned. They canvassed the mountain again, desperately hoping to find any sign of Joe. Nothing ever turned up. In the investigation that followed, police thoroughly questioned the 3 friends who were last with Joe. Initially, LaForge, Marks, and Diaz were considered persons of interest. Rumors heavily swirled in the local community about what might have really happened on that dark mountain road. Yet law enforcement could find no hard evidence of foul play. The 3 young friends maintained their claim. Joe simply walked off into the night. No one reported witnessing any crime. Simply put, there was zero proof that any crime whatsoever had even occurred. With no body, no witnesses beyond the 3 of them, and no physical clues, Joe's case languished. From early on, there were basically 2 leading theories about what happened to Joseph Helt: a tragic accident amid hazardous conditions, or foul play at the hands of the very people he was with. The accident hypothesis suggests that Joe became disoriented on a frigid night. He may have stumbled into the unforgiving terrain of the region. The landscape atop the Shawangunk Ridge is notoriously treacherous. It is dotted with crevices, hidden caves, and steep cliffs obscured by brush. In winter, these hazards are often completely hidden by snow and ice. A popular idea is that Joe could have slipped into one of the deep ice caves, or he fell from a ledge while trying to find his way home. If he succumbed to hypothermia or an injury in a remote crag before the heavy snowstorm, his body might have been quickly buried by snowfall, hidden from rescuers. It is also worth noting that Lake Maratanza, the high-elevation lake near where the car was stuck, was frozen at the time. This raises the distinct possibility that Joe fell through the ice, though no evidence ever indicated this actually happened. However, a second, far more sinister theory has persisted: that Joe helped met with foul play that night. Suspicion has long swirled around the three companions who were with him in the car. The fact that Joe had fiercely argued with LaForge, Marks, and Diaz at the party raised massive red flags for his family and friends. Some have suggested that the conflict could have easily reignited after they drove off together, leading to a violent confrontation on the snowy mountain road. That said, ultimately there is nothing concrete to support this scenario. It remains entirely speculative. November 22, 2018. This is Woodland Park, Colorado, elevation 8,465 feet, nestled deeply within Teller County, just 35 miles west of Colorado Springs. Woodland Park sits directly in the shadow of Pikes Peak. While it is a quiet mountain city with tidy streets and a local grocery store, it is the type of tight-knit community where everyone basically knows everyone else. On Thanksgiving morning, a young mother walking into a Safeway with her toddler is completely unremarkable. It is ordinary. It is the exact kind of mundane routine that plays out 1,000 times a day in towns dotted across the country. At 12:30 in the afternoon, the date is still November 22, 2018, digital surveillance cameras inside that Woodland Park Safeway capture something critical. It is Kelsey Barrett. She is pushing a grocery cart. Her 1-year-old daughter Kaylee is riding right there in the front seat. Kelsey was 29 years old. Professionally, she worked as a licensed flight instructor at DOS Aviation over in Pueblo. We are talking about a highly skilled pilot who filed her flight plans with meticulous, absolute precision. Her family would later focus heavily on the specific trait, the sheer structure of her life. She simply never traveled anywhere without telling someone exactly where she was heading. She was engaged to a man named Patrick Frazee. He was a horseshoeing contractor who owned a 35-acre ranch in Florissant, which is roughly 15 miles away. Little Kaylee was their daughter. Right before leaving the store, Kelsey bought sweet potatoes, like she actually texted Frazee right then, telling him about the sweet potatoes just in case he wanted a casserole for Thanksgiving dinner. So it is the single most ordinary detail imaginable: a mother buying holiday groceries, texting her partner, her baby sitting in the cart. Earlier that morning, she had spoken to her mother on the phone, and she sounded completely happy. A normal mother-daughter conversation. That is exactly how Cheryl Barrett would later describe it to investigators. There was absolutely nothing unusual, nothing at all, to suggest the horrific gears that were already in motion. Then at 1:23 in the afternoon, a neighbor's security camera captures a new image. Kelsey Barrett and baby Kaylee are walking into Kelsey's townhome together. Look closely at the footage. Kelsey is carrying a bright poinsettia plant she had just picked up at the Safeway. That specific frame, 3 of them crossing the threshold, the holiday plant in her arms, her little daughter right beside her, is the final confirmed footage of Kelsey Barrett alive. Now, what exactly happened inside that townhome between approximately 1:30 and 3:30 that afternoon? That question forms the absolute core of the prosecution's entire criminal case against Patrick Frazee. Based on extensive testimony delivered at trial, the state's theory is brutal. Frazee beat Kelsey to death using a baseball bat right there inside her home, all while little Kaylee was left waiting in another room. But let us be clear here that as a prosecution theory, it is not a confirmed forensic finding. To this day, Kelsey's body has never been found. While the physical evidence recovered by forensics inside the townhome was enough to convince investigators that a violent crime had occurred, it was simply not enough to reconstruct the exact sequence of events. The cold, hard reality is this: Kelsey Barrett walked through her front door at 1:23 in the afternoon. She was never seen and heard from in any verifiable way again. The very first indication that something was terribly wrong emerged 3 days later on November 25th. Kelsey's employer over at DOS Aviation received a text message sent from her phone. The message stated she would not be coming into work the following week. Strangely, on that exact same day, cell tower record indicated that Kelsey's phone was pinging off a network tower near Gooding, Idaho. That is over 600 miles north of Woodland Park, a trajectory stretching straight across Utah and deep into the southern portion of Idaho. Frazee himself told law enforcement investigators that he had received texts from her phone that day too. The immediate implication, if you did not know the dark truth, was that Kelsey had simply left, that she had gone somewhere else, packing it to take some time away. But it was not Kelsey sending those text messages. See, Frazee was harboring a massive secret. He had been maintaining a relationship with a woman named Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse living in Twin Falls, Idaho. She had been quietly, deliberately woven into his life right alongside his public engagement to Kelsey. In the long months leading up to Thanksgiving 2018, Frazee actually approached Kenny on 3 separate occasions with explicit requests to murder Kelsey Barrett. 3 times those initial plots required Kenny to travel all the way from Idaho down to Colorado. On one occasion, she got close enough to hand-deliver a coffee to Kelsey at her own front door while pretending to be a friendly neighbor. Kenny had considered poisoning that drink. Ultimately, she could not go through with it. None of those 3 initial attempts succeeded. Eventually, according to Kenny's subsequent testimony to investigators, Frazee decided to handle the matter himself. Sometime after the killing on Thanksgiving, Frazee handed Kelsey's phone directly to Kenny. Kenny then drove that device back through Colorado, across Utah, and all the way home to Idaho. The phone pinged off local cell towers the entire drive, systematically building a completely manufactured digital data trail. It was designed to suggest Kelsey had traveled north entirely of her own free will. To finalize the lie, Kenny used the phone to send texts to Frazee and to Kelsey's supervisor at work, deliberately maintaining the absolute fiction that Kelsey was alive and well, just traveling. It was a highly calculated misdirection. It was constructed carefully, and it worked perfectly for 10 days. On December 2nd, after enduring days of completely unanswered phone calls and text messages, Kelsey's mother Cheryl officially reported her daughter missing. Local police officers quickly conducted a welfare check at the townhome. What they found was deeply unsettling. Both of Kelsey's vehicles were parked right there in the driveway. Her suitcases were still inside the house. Food had been left sitting out on the kitchen table. Even her toothbrush was left behind in the bathroom. Only her cell phone and her purse were missing from the home. Items that, as it would later become terrifyingly clear, Frazee had personally ensured were removed from the scene as part of his cover-up. That 10-day gap between Kelsey's actual death and her family's formal missing persons report was not born out of carelessness, not at all. It was the direct result of a highly sophisticated, carefully executed deception. You had texts regularly outgoing from her phone, a manufactured narrative about her taking a trip, and a fiancé presenting himself to everyone as cooperative. Right, the critical first week. Exact window when forensic evidence is freshest and tracking trails are warmest, slipped away entirely because investigators had absolutely no idea a crime had even been committed. When you look back at the evidence, Patrick Frazee was not subtle about his desires. Honestly, that is one of the most deeply unsettling aspects of this entire case. It is not just the horror that a man murdered his fiancée. It is the fact that he had been actively trying to manipulate someone else into doing it for months before he finally took matters into his own hands. That extended plotting left a literal trail of witnesses who knew exactly what he was planning to do. Take Margaret Luce, for example. She was a regular customer of Frazee's horseshoeing business. She told investigators that Frazee had spoken quite openly to her about his intense desire to raise little Kaylee entirely without Kelsey. He told her flat out that he just wanted her gone so he could raise his daughter with someone else. I mean, that is not just some passing venting frustration. That is a clearly stated intention explicitly spoken to a business client months before Thanksgiving 2018. Luce immediately came forward to law enforcement after news broke that Kelsey had vanished. When investigators finally tracked down Crystal Lee Kenny in Idaho in late December, she agreed to cooperate with the authorities. What she laid out across hours of recorded interviews was cold. It was premeditated. The details made the entire Thanksgiving timeline feel less like a sudden, explosive outburst of domestic violence, and more like the inevitable conclusion of a long, calculated process. Frazee had actively recruited her to kill Kelsey 3 separate times between September and October of 2018. She had dutifully made the drive from Idaho to Colorado on every single one of those occasions. Like we mentioned, on one specific visit, she stood close enough to Kelsey to hand her a cup of coffee, fully intending to poison it. But she froze. The plan collapsed every single time. And so, according to Kenny's chilling testimony, Frazee ultimately executed the plot himself on Thanksgiving afternoon. He used a baseball bat inside Kelsey's own home while their 1-year-old daughter sat waiting in another room. Kenny went on to tell investigators that Frazee destroyed the evidence at his ranch. He burned Kelsey's body, the baseball bat, and the blood-soaked clothing using gasoline inside a large burn pit on the fluorescent property. She described watching him pour fuel and feed material directly into the roaring flames. According to her, he even discussed disposing of the remaining ash inside a local landfill or dumping it into a river. That specific confession drove the massive multi-agency search that followed. A small army of law enforcement officers, including the Woodland Park Police Department, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the Teller County Sheriff's Office, converged to serve a search warrant on Frazie's 35-acre ranch. They dug, they searched, they found human teeth, they found bloody sheets, they recovered dozens of items from the dirt. At the time of the excavation, authorities did not publicly confirm whether those teeth belonged to Kelsey. Later, the Waste Management Midway landfill located south of Fountain, Colorado, became the target of a massive, incredibly resource-intensive search operation. Teams worked meticulously through tons of compacted waste material. Despite those monumental efforts, Kelsey Barrett's remains were never found. On December 21, 2018, exactly 29 days after Kelsey was last seen alive, Patrick Frazee was formally arrested at his ranch. Prosecutors hit him with heavy charges: first-degree murder, solicitation to commit murder, and tampering with a deceased human body. A judge ordered him held without bond. Facing the court, he entered a plea of not guilty. The criminal trial finally commenced in November of 2019. The state's entire case against Frazee rested squarely on the shoulders of Crystal Lee Kenny's testimony. She had previously pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of tampering with evidence in direct exchange for her full cooperation with prosecutors. As a University of Colorado law professor who closely followed the proceedings put it, the entire prosecution lived and died on Kenny's personal account. There was very little direct physical evidence tying Frazee to Kelsey's death. What the state did have, however, was a first-hand witness. A witness who admitted under oath that she had observed the gruesome aftermath, had actively helped cover it up, and had agreed to participate in 3 separate murder plots before the 4th attempt finally succeeded. On November 18, 2019, the jury returned their verdict. Patrick Frazee was convicted of first-degree murder on all counts. The judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without any possibility of parole, plus an additional 156 years for the remaining charges. He was 30 years old. To this day, he has never uttered a single word about where Kelsey is hidden. Following the guilty verdict, 2 agents from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, who spent months working the case, sat down for an interview. One of them was asked what still deeply unsettles him about the investigation. His answer was simple: why? How? Not who, but why. Why did Patrick Frazee decide that the only solution to a relationship he no longer wanted was a brutal murder? A murder planned meticulously over several months and then executed on Thanksgiving Day while his own baby daughter sat mere 20 feet away. That agent stated he will never stop searching for Kelsey's remains. Sadly, as of the latest public reporting, they have still not been found. Little Kaylee Barrett was ultimately raised by Kelsey's loving family. The 35-acre ranch out in Florissant still stands there today. Frazee remains locked away inside a Colorado maximum security prison. The final answer to where her body lies sits right there with him in that dark cell, utterly declining to be spoken. On March 29, 2008, a 22-year-old woman named Becky Elshani, who went by Becky among her friends and family, was last seen at 1 o'clock in the morning in Colorado Springs. Becky grew up as one of 10 children in a large Albanian family. She entered the world in New Jersey, yet by her teenage years, the family had relocated to Colorado Springs. Even after she reached adulthood and lived independently, Becky stayed exceptionally close with all her siblings. People who knew her spoke of her as kind and loving, a beautiful soul who found joy in the outdoors and possessed a wonderful sense of laughter. Her connection with her boyfriend Daniel Durer, however, stood out as troubled, really troubled. Becky and Daniel first crossed paths about 6 years before, while both worked at a local call center. They began dating in a casual manner. At one point, Daniel relocated to Detroit. During his absence, Becky started seeing another man, a guy named West Bartow. In time, Becky and West entered into marriage, yet that union proved brief and it did not endure. When Daniel returned to Colorado Springs, the two reunited. They chose to move in together during early 2007. In the beginning, matters appeared stable, but the relationship deteriorated rapidly. Jealousy and bitterness came to dominate their interactions. They engaged in frequent and violent fights. In May 2007, an argument erupted over phone calls from Wes, who was Becky's ex-husband. In the heat of that dispute, Becky struck Daniel in the face. Authorities arrested her at charges of assault. Only a few months afterward, at a party, another confrontation took place. Becky believed Daniel had become too intoxicated to operate a vehicle safely. As she attempted to remove his car keys, Daniel responded by deploying a stun gun against her. Becky reported to officials that Daniel had stunned her an estimated 20 times. Daniel faced arrest for assault in October 2007. Despite the violence, despite the repeated arguments and the cruelty, the pair reconciled before their court dates arrived. In the end, both assault charges were dismissed. One additional legal matter persisted. On New Year's Eve, Daniel had been taken into custody on suspicion of harassment. Law enforcement determined he had accessed Becky's MySpace account without permission, posted nude photos of her, and altered her contact email address to his own personal account. Daniel faced a court appearance on April 1, 2008, to address the harassment and computer crimes allegations. Several members of Becky's family expressed the belief that Daniel perceived a threat from Becky's ongoing ties with her ex-husband Wes, and that those suspicions created deep strains within their relationship. On the evening of March 28, only days before Daniel's scheduled court date, Becky and Daniel spent time late into the night at her parents' house. The family had assembled there for a shared meal and moments together. The gathering carried the potential for a pleasant evening, yet tensions between Becky and Daniel escalated sharply. Becky's younger sister Fatima observed the argument unfold. Daniel raised his voice toward Becky. Becky repeatedly stated she did not wish to depart and preferred to remain with her family. The family encouraged her to stay because they sensed something amiss, but Daniel insisted she accompany him, and Becky ultimately left with him. That departure marked the final occasion Fatima saw her sister. When the family received no communication from Becky throughout Sunday or Monday, concern mounted. Becky maintained very close contact with her relatives. She kept in regular touch. This absence deviated from her established patterns. The family reached out to police and requested a welfare check. On the evening of March 31st, the day preceding Daniel's court appearance, officers arrived at the apartment Becky and Daniel shared in northwest Colorado Springs. The time stood at about 9:30 in the evening. As the officers drew near the residence, they heard the unmistakable report of a gunshot. Upon entering, they discovered 25-year-old Daniel Durer inside. He had taken his own life. No trace of Becky appeared at the location. No indications of a struggle existed within the apartment. No proof suggested Becky had suffered harm there. Daniel left behind no note to clarify events or her whereabouts. Upon learning of Daniel's suicide, Becky's family immediately concluded something terrible had befallen her. "We have no hope at this point," Becky's mother Doris stated to the press through tears. "I feel it in my bones, my daughter is gone." During processing of the scene, investigators located evidence inside Daniel's red Toyota 4Runner. Although specifics remained limited, they recovered blood. Further analysis became necessary to establish whether the blood belonged to Becky. Daniel's cellular provider collaborated with authorities to supply phone records. Those records indicated that following the March 28 argument, Daniel traveled west from Colorado Springs into the mountains, specifically toward Woodland Park in Teller County, Colorado, mere hours after Becky's last sighting. Investigators determined Becky likely accompanied him on that drive, and that the journey probably represented the final time she traveled anywhere with another person. Becky's mother noted Daniel had been raised in Woodland Park and possessed strong familiarity with the region. Colorado Springs police deployed search dogs, all-terrain vehicles, and a helicopter to examine the mountainous landscape, yet those efforts yielded no results. The Teller County Sheriff's Office participated by directing deputies into remote sections of the county in search of tire tracks. Volunteers joined forces with family members to comb various mountainous zones. They utilized their own four-wheelers and trucks while concentrating on campgrounds and locations where Becky and Daniel had previously camped together, particularly areas west and south of Woodland Park such as Gold Camp Road and Cripple Creek. Becky's ex-husband West Bartow received quick clearance as a suspect in the disappearance, and he contributed actively to the search. Numerous relatives of Becky, including sisters who traveled from the East Coast, arrived from out of town to assist, but no discoveries followed. 9 months passed before police verified the blood from Daniel's vehicle matched Becky. By that stage, momentum in the case had decreased considerably, even as occasional tips continued to arrive. Holidays proved especially difficult for Becky's family. Her birthday fell only 2 days after Christmas. They marked the occasion with a large cake and reflected on positive memories shared with her. Each year on the anniversary of her disappearance, the family assembles to honor Becky's life and to resume searching for any trace of her whereabouts. They have upheld this tradition without interruption every single year. In 2017, a police spokesman indicated authorities believed Becky had been taken from this life, yet absent verifying details or a body, the case stayed open. The El-Shani family established a $5,000 reward for information leading to resolution in their daughter's matter. That That amount has since risen to $25,000. Investigators held the view that if Daniel played a role in Becky's situation, he likely disclosed his actions to another person before ending his life. But unfortunately, no individual has stepped forward with such details. If Daniel confided in someone, the information never reached authorities or the family to provide closure about Becky's location. Becky Elshani has never been found. If any information exists regarding Becky May Elshani's disappearance, please contact the Colorado Springs Police Department. February 28, 2019. At Glacier Gorge in Rocky Mountain National Park, James Pruitt, a 70-year-old man from Etowah, Tennessee, had retired into a routine that featured winter journeys to the Colorado Rockies. This particular visit marked his third consecutive winter stay in Rocky Mountain National Park. He possessed solid knowledge of the Bear Lake facility. He had completed hikes there several times during that same week. He reached the park on February 22nd and ventured onto trails almost daily thereafter. By the morning of February 28th, when he departed from the Glacier Gorge trailhead, he stood as no newcomer to this environment. He qualified as a repeat visitor who had invested sufficient time to understand the trails, the distances, and the play of light throughout the valley. He carried a Nikon Coolpix 900 camera with him. He wore a dark blue jacket along with a red or orange beanie. He began his outing at approximately 10 in the morning. He shared no specific destination with his family back in Tennessee for that day. That missing detail later complicated the search efforts considerably. No planned route, no endpoint communicated to anyone. A man who had hiked extensively within this park over the course of a full week, who understood the trail connections around Bear Lake and Glacier Gorge thoroughly enough to navigate them with confidence, who ventured out solo on a cold February morning without informing a single person about his intended direction, never made it back to his vehicle. From February 28th until March 3rd, when his car finally drew notice at the Glacier Gorge trailhead, 2 feet of snow accumulated across the complete search zone. 2 feet of fresh snowfall covered every trail, every drainage, and every off-trail path where someone might have walked or fallen. Any tracks James Pruitt created on February 28th vanished before searchers could begin looking. The snow had transformed the whole landscape anew. Every visible clue, every possible scent trail, and every footprint throughout the forest had been wiped away. On March 3rd, park rangers located the vehicle at the trailhead and notified Pruitt's family in Tennessee. The family verified his presence in the area and confirmed their last contact occurred on Thursday morning, February 28th, at approximately 10 in the morning. The search operation launched that same day. The effort that unfolded ranked among the most intensive search and rescue activities in recent Rocky Mountain National Park records. The main phase extended from March 3rd through March 9th, while spanning roughly 15 square miles. Coverage included the Glacier Gorge drainage, the Lockvale drainage, the Glacier Creek drainage, Alberta Falls, Nymph Lake, Chaos Canyon, Lake Hayaha, Mario's Gully, the winter trail routes leading toward Mills Lake, and the Loch, Sky Pond, plus Flat Top Mountain. Between 30 and 50 search and rescue team members operated in the field daily, sourced from the National Park Service Group, Larimer County Search and Rescue, Rocky Mountain Rescue or Diamond Peak Ski Patrol, Douglas County Search and Rescue, the Alpine Rescue Team, and various specialized dog units. A state multi-mission aircraft conducted fixed-wing aerial surveys, equipped with heat-sensing technology above the higher elevation ground. Conditions during these operations proved severe. Searchers away from packed trails encountered snow reaching chest depth. Wind speeds reached 40 miles per hour along exposed ridges. The drainages, particularly the Glacier Gorge drainage and the Prospect Canyon corridor, contained heavy dead and downed timber, along with thick willow growth and mountain streams flowing beneath unstable snow layers. Progress through such territory at a deliberate search pace demanded considerable physical exertion, which in turn restricted daily coverage per team. On March 15th, the large-scale search received official suspension. No clues turned up at all, not one article of clothing, not a camera strap, and not even a glove snagged on a branch emerged. Nothing appeared, yet the search continued in reduced form throughout the summer and fall of 2019. Smaller focused group revisited designated portions of the area whenever improving conditions and receding snow allowed. Each occasion when snow melted away from a drainage, a boulder field, or a forested section, search teams returned to inspect what the winter had concealed. Each time the outcome remained the same with nothing found. On October 9th, nearly 7 months following Pruitt's disappearance, 50 personnel took part in one last extensive effort centered at the Prospect Canyon drainage and the Glacier Gorge drainage above Jewel Lake, in zones of dense timber and thick undergrowth that winter conditions had made nearly impenetrable. When that operation also produced no results, James Pruitt continued to be listed as a missing person. His Nikon Coolpix 900 camera, which he brought specifically to capture images of this landscape he revisited each winter, has never surfaced. His planned path of February 28th stays unknown. Whether he deviated from maintained trails remains undetermined. Here stands what does not align with the extensive work of the search teams. Heat-sensing aerial surveillance operated over ground that during late winter offered little interference from warm-bodied wildlife. 50 trained individuals examined 15 square miles through repeated operations that stretched across 7 months. A man familiar with this park who had traversed these exact trails shortly before his disappearance left behind no detectable sign. Despite all those resources, his car remained parked at the Glacier Gorge trailhead amid the snow. 50 searchers covered 15 square miles over 7 months of work. No one located a single footprint, a single fiber, or a single photograph from the camera he carried when he left that parking area on a February morning and failed to return. The final case within this series stands as the most recent in 2023. An experienced trail runner, 49 years of age, departed from the western side of Rocky Mountain National Park along a 28-mile path that crossed the Continental Divide. He transmitted 2 text messages from within the park, complete with location data, confirming he remained alive and in motion. Afterward, the mountain fell silent, and all technological tools brought in to locate him returned empty results. Certain aspects of this park have stayed unchanged through the years. It was August 15th, 1958. The setting: Camp St. Malo, tucked away in Estes Park, Colorado. This specific Catholic youth camp sat right on the boundary of Rocky Mountain National Park, way out in the foothills at an elevation of roughly 7,500 feet. It was deeply wooded and incredibly remote. You know, the exact kind of isolation you expect from mountain camps. The wilderness essentially began right past the tree line at the very edge of the property. A 10-year-old boy named Bobby Bizup was enrolled there for the summer season. By all available accounts, Bobby was just a normally active kid. There were absolutely no recorded behavioral issues, 0 signs of distress leading up to that day, and honestly nothing whatsoever to suggest what was about to happen next. The camp director later provided a straightforward narrative of the events. Bobby had gone out fishing with a few camp counselors and a small group of other boys. But on the walk back toward the main lodge, he somehow failed to follow. Once the counselors realized he was missing, they immediately reported the disappearance to the camp staff, triggering a massive search that began almost instantly. What followed can only be described as a massive, full-scale mobilization of resources. Military personnel joined forces with local police, National Park Service rangers, and hundreds of civilian volunteers. Together they combed through the campgrounds, the surrounding dense forest, and the trails radiating deep into the wilderness. They searched relentlessly for days. Yet Bobby Bizup was nowhere to be found. Fast forward to the following summer, the summer of 1959, when a group of hikers unexpectedly stumbled across some of Bobby's physical remains. But here is the catch. They were not anywhere near the camp or the trails that had been meticulously combed after he vanished. Actually, these remains were located several miles west of Camp St. Malo, positioned high up on the rugged face of Mount Meeker at an elevation of approximately 11,000 feet. I mean, that is more than 3,000 feet higher than the summer camp itself. It is simply not a destination a 10-year-old child could ever reach on his own during a routine fishing trip, right? Ultimately, the official cause of Bobby's death was never definitively established by authorities. The bizarre circumstances regarding exactly how his remains ended up on that mountain face were never explained either. So the case was filed away, grew completely cold, and for several decades that is precisely where it stayed. Now this is the exact moment where the narrative turns incredibly dark. In 2021, the National Park Service Investigative Services Branch formally reopened the investigation. What prompted this sudden action? Well, it was a piece of evidence that no investigator had ever been able to account for previously. A fragment of Bobby Bizup's skull had suddenly surfaced. Forensic experts identified it as very likely belonging to Bobby, and when investigators finally traced the exact origin of where this skull fragment had been all this time, the answer pointed directly to a quiet, private home. As it turns out, the skull fragment had been inside the personal possession of Dr. Joseph McClaskey, a devout Catholic church member who happened to be a close personal friend of the specific priest running Camp St. Malo. McClaskey passed away back in 1980. Upon his death, the human remains were passed down directly to his son, Tom McClaskey. Tom kept it for decades. Think about that. A piece of a deceased 10-year-old boy's skull just sat inside a private residence for generations, all while Bobby's official case gathered dust in a filing cabinet somewhere, leaving his grieving family completely without answers. Whether that pattern of horrific abuse connects directly to Bobby's ultimate demise remains officially unknown. Whether the skull fragment was kept deliberately as a trophy or to conceal evidence of a heinous crime is also officially unknown. And why exactly a piece of a missing child's skeletal remains ended up in the private possession of a close friend of the camp's founding priest, that too is officially unknown. Here is what we do know for a fact. Bobby Bizup vanished without a trace on August 15, 1958. His skeletal remains were eventually recovered high up on a mountain peak that no young child could ever reach alone. For the next 60-plus years, a piece of his skull remained hidden inside a private home. Today, the National Park Service investigation remains open and ongoing. No one has ever been charged with a crime. Bobby's father has long since passed away, and his surviving family members have spent more than 6 decades waiting for answers they still do not have. Somewhere deep within the historic records of Camp St. Malo, or perhaps buried inside the private correspondence of men who are now also dead, there may lie a true explanation. An explanation for exactly why a 10-year-old boy ended up 3,000 feet above his summer camp on the unforgiving face of a mountain. But so far, that explanation has never been made public. July 2, 1938, Rocky Mountain National Park, located in Colorado. The Beilhardt family had just driven out to Estes Park, looking for a simple vacation of fishing and hiking. It was the exact kind of trip families frequently took through the summer, when the mountains were lushly green and the air was perfectly clear. Alfred was 3 years old at the time. Actually, some historical sources state he was 4. The official records are heavily disputed. Either way, he was exceptionally small. He was blond. He was also known to drift toward the back of the group whenever they walked. That specific detail fundamentally matters, because on a dirt trail running alongside Fall River, positioned in a narrow corridor of dense conifer brush and extremely fast mountain water, that is exactly what he did. He drifted back, and then he was completely gone. His shocked parents abruptly turned around to look. The trail behind them sat entirely empty. There was no sound. Not a single splash. Just a thin dirt path threading through the massive trees. Nothing at the end of it. The massive search that immediately followed became one of the largest ever mounted in Rocky Mountain National Park at that specific time. Ranger literally dammed Fall River and dragged the silty bottom of it. The primary assumption being that a toddler had stumbled in and then swept violently under the current. They found absolutely nothing. Not a lost shoe, not a torn piece of clothing. Bloodhounds were eventually brought in to assist the growing effort. Now here is the truly critical detail. The dogs followed a scent trail for exactly 500 feet before they completely stopped. Not at the rushing water, not at a steep cliff edge. They stopped directly in the exact middle of the trail, and they stopped cold. They would not move forward. Within mere days, the desperate search had grown to 150 men, which notably included volunteers from the Civilian Conservation Corps. They heavily combed the deep forest. They checked every available drainage pipe and rigorously surveyed the creek banks miles downstream. For 10 solid days, they tirelessly searched the wilderness. On day 10, they finally gave in. The official governmental position became what it had been from the very start. Alfred had likely drowned, and the tiny body had been carried off by the violent current. It was the only logical explanation that fit the local geography. Except that the creek had been meticulously dammed and dragged. There was absolutely nothing resting in it. The heartbroken family eventually went home without him. Then the day immediately after Alfred vanished at thin air, 2 passing hikers in a completely different section of the national park reported something that did not fit the official drowning theory at all. When they were walking quietly along Old Fall Road, they spotted a small boy. He was sitting on a high rocky ledge called Devil's Nest, situated on the imposing face of Mount Chapin. The little boy was resting on the very edge of the sharp elevation. They stated for several distinct minutes, and then they described the haunting event this way. He was jerked back, not by his own physical movement. He was forcefully jerked back by someone lurking off to the side, someone the frightened hikers could not see clearly from their distant vantage point. They quickly contacted park officials. Search teams were quickly sent out to the high cliff top. Absolutely nothing was found. This is precisely where it stops being a normal tragedy and morphs into something else entirely. Devil's Nest is practically inaccessible to a 3-year-old traveling on foot. It is definitely not a place a wandering toddler reaches by mere accident. Basically, for Alfred Beilhardt to be located on that isolated ledge, an adult had to intentionally take him there, and someone was standing quietly just outside the hiker's line of sight, physically pulling him back from the deadly drop. Weeks later, disturbing reports came pouring in from Nebraska. A small boy had been spotted walking down a local rural road alongside an unknown adult male. A photo composite was rapidly developed from various witness descriptions. The true identity of that suspicious man was never established. The young boy was never conclusively confirmed to be Alfred. It remains officially unconfirmed today. 5 agonizing months after Alfred originally vanished, a typed ransom note miraculously arrived at his family's private home. $500 the note aggressively demanded. Local police investigated the letter and swiftly concluded it was just a cruel hoax. The formal investigation stalled out. The Creek theory stubbornly held. The entire case went incredibly cold. But here is what does not make any logical sense. The highly trained bloodhound stopped at exactly 500 feet, not at the water's edge. The thorough creek drag found 0 physical evidence. The sole sighting that produced a specific geographic location put Alfred somewhere no toddler ever goes alone, accompanied by someone no investigator could ever identify. And then a bizarre ransom note arrived several months later. Hoax or not, someone physically wrote it. Someone intimately knew the Beilhardt surname. They understood the vast park layout and knew the tragedy well enough to attempt a brain extortion scheme. That individual was never caught. Alfred's grieving father never accepted the simple drowning explanation. He stated publicly for the rest of his natural life that he firmly believed a stranger had forcefully taken his son. His dedicated parents returned to Rocky Mountain National Park to search. They kept returning year after lonely year. They kept looking around the trees until they were far too old to look anymore. Nobody was ever recovered. No human remains were ever discovered in that freezing creek or buried deep inside those dense woods. Nothing anywhere in that vast park. That is the final confirmed fact in Alfred Beilhardt's tragic case. A 4-year-old boy walking on a narrow trail alongside Fall River. Bloodhounds that abruptly stopped for no apparent reason. A shadowy figure standing on a cliff top no child could safely reach. And 86 long years of utter silence. On November 18, 2006, a 29-year-old woman named Maria Olea visited her brother's residence in Colorado Springs. Maria, also known as Rosa, served as a mother to a young son and maintained shared custody with the child's father. The time was 6:30 in the evening. Maria stayed with her family. When her cell phone rang, she checked the screen, responded with a few words, then informed her brother she needed to leave and would return soon. She stepped out the door and no one saw her again. At 7:14 in the evening, an incoming call to Maria's phone continued for 3 minutes. That represented the final call she ever answered. The following day, Maria failed to collect her son from his father. Such absence went completely against her character. Maria never missed picking up her son, never. Her family filed a missing person report on November 20th. Maria had left the majority of her possessions at her apartment, including new living room furniture and uncashed child support checks on the counter. Yet her phone and purse vanished along with her and were never recovered. 6 days after her disappearance, police discovered her sport utility vehicle, a blue 1999 Chevrolet Blazer. The vehicle sat locked and abandoned inside the parking lot of Zia's Italian Kitchen, a restaurant positioned near Interstate 25. That location lay a considerable distance from her apartment and did not represent a place Maria visited regularly. But a connection existed. The brother of one of Maria's friends held a job at Zia's. Investigators therefore began inquiring. Did Maria travel there to encounter someone? Did she recognize the caller? Did an individual draw her to the spot? They further established that Maria had lost her position at Mimi's Cafe recently. She pursued new employment actively. Multiple prospective employers had left messages on her cell phone concerning job possibilities. Her family conveyed to investigators that Maria would never leave her child behind. She cherished her son and approached her duties with seriousness. They added that Maria behaved in her usual manner right before she vanished, showed no signs of stress, and gave no indication of any problems. Police examined the blazer thoroughly. It remained locked with no evidence of a struggle and no signs of foul play inside. Yet Maria's phone and purse were absent and Maria herself had disappeared. Foul play remained suspected, but more than 18 years later, answers continue to elude everyone. Did a caller persuade Maria to meet at Zia's? Did an incident occur inside that parking lot? Or did Maria visit another destination first with someone else, driving her sport utility vehicle there afterward to mislead the inquiry? The truth stays unknown. Maria Olea has never been found. If any information exists about Maria Olea's disappearance, please contact the Colorado Springs Police Department. June 9, 2013, at Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado. Mesa Verde occupies the far southwest portion of the state, close to the Four Corners Junction where the borders of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico converge. At one location, the park centers of the cliff dwellings, constructed by the ancestral Puebloans, which consist of large stone structures fitted into overhanging canyon walls. Some dating 600 to 800 years old and preserved remarkably well within the arid desert atmosphere, as though the builders had simply departed for a short time and never returned. The canyon network beneath the mesa descends deeply and irregularly, filled with ledges and abrupt drops hidden from view above, while the Ute Mountain Reservation territory commences at the canyon base. When Chief Ranger Farinas later recounted the challenges of searching that landscape, he described it directly, noting that if someone fell into that canyon system among the spaces between rock formations, even helicopters passing straight overhead would fail to spot them. The terrain became the setting for Dale Staley's disappearance. Staley, a 62-year-old man from Goliad, Texas, had arranged with his wife Denise for a 3-week driving tour across the national parks of the American Southwest, one of those retirement journeys anticipated for years. They approached the planning with care and precision. June represented day 4 of their itinerary. They had driven from the Four Corners region to Mesa Verde, and accounts indicated the day progressed smoothly. During the morning, Dale informed Denise he intended to walk down to Spruce Tree House. This site counts as one of the park's most reachable and frequently visited cliff dwellings along a trail that rises steeply yet measures only a quarter mile in length, a route thousands of visitors traverse each season without difficulty. He assured her he would return in about 20 minutes. 2 hours went by. Denise alerted park staff. Rangers initiated a search along the Spruce Tree House Trail and adjacent areas. The nature of the terrain itself shaped the entire narrative because Mesa Verde presents differently than it appears from roadways or overlooks, where it resembles a manageable mesa with contained trails. Yet the canyon walls plunge sharply from trail edges, and those drops often stay concealed until one stands at the brink. A single misstep off the path does not offer a recoverable slope, but instead results in a fall into the canyon system, where ledges trap objects and keep them concealed from above and unreachable from below, absent specialized rope teams. The subsequent search extended for 2 weeks. More than 60 rescuers took part. Helicopters patrolled canyon corridors. 2 dog teams covered the trail and nearby vegetation. Rope teams descended cliff faces into areas demanding technical gear for access. Chief Ranger Farinas, who directed the operation and later called this matter the one that lingered with him longer than any other in his career, kept Dale Staley's photograph displayed on his wall for years afterwards. He stated plainly the obstacles confronting the teams. If a fall occurred off a cliff or between rock formations, unless observers looked directly downward, even helicopters would miss the location. That assessment reflected reality rather than an excuse, describing precisely how mesa and canyon landscapes complicate search operations. A body situated 20 feet from a trail in that environment, lodged within a rock formation along a canyon wall, can remain entirely hidden from aerial view and inaccessible on foot without precise knowledge of the spot. Dale Staley's wife Denise rejected that description as justification for halting the effort. She voiced public criticism of the search, noting rangers had conducted only 2 days of thorough work before reduced operations. The National Park Service provided case materials to the family. The matter shifted to cold case status, but according to operational measures, the terrain had prevailed. Here stands what does not align in this instance. The Spruce Treehouse Trail extends only a quarter mile. It ranks among the most traveled routes in Mesa Verde National Park rather than a remote backcountry path, a technical climb, or a trail needing special fitness or expertise. It functions as a standard tourist route inside a well-monitored park on a clear afternoon. Yet a 62-year-old man with no known medical concerns, no motive to stray from the path, and every incentive to return to his wife simply failed to reappear. No personal items surfaced anywhere along the trail, no discarded object, no hat, no water bottle, and nothing else to mark a precise trouble spot. The trail offered no clues. The leading explanation, which remains a theory rather than established fact, suggests Dale Staley left the trail near one of the canyon drop-offs, possibly by accident or due to a medical issue, and fell into the system below. Should that have occurred in an appropriate place, he might lie within a quarter mile of the trailhead, yet stay invisible to search teams, unaware of the exact rock formation involved. Whether Dale Staley reached the Spruce Treehouse ruins stays undetermined. Whether he departed the trail before or after viewing them remains unknown. The canyon beneath the mesa could contain the resolution hidden in an area decades of patrols and shifting seasonal light have not revealed. Denise Staley departed Mesa Verde National Park by herself. The cliff dwellings endure with stone walls, wooden beams, and handprints embedded in plaster by those who constructed the site and later vanished without record. The Park Service has not supplied a conclusive explanation for Dale's fate. The trail stays open with visitors walking it each season, a quarter mile down and a quarter mile back, 20 minutes with no apparent reason for complication. That constitutes the final verified detail in Dale Staley's case. A man who assured his wife of a return within 20 minutes, along a path so brief it hardly qualifies as a hike inside a park, staffed by rangers, frequented by tourists, and supported by helicopters. And then, nothing further. There is a specific zone in the Colorado wilderness where GPS fails. Search dogs lose the scent entirely, and people disappear without a single footprint left in the snow. Authorities call it bad luck. Locals call it something much worse. Here is the unsettling truth about Colorado's missing cases. Get your drink ready, get comfy, and let's move. August 7th, 1988. Silver Plume, Colorado. Silver Plume is a small town, actually. A profoundly tiny settlement harboring fewer than 200 residents tucked into a claustrophobic mountain valley 9,100 feet just south of Interstate Fendi. That is where Clear Creek physically carves its path right through the solid rock. You walk down the single main street and see a random scattering of old Victorian building was left over from the silver mining era. Mountains rise at impossibly steep angles on every single side. It feels, isolated. This is exactly the sort of tight-knit community where everyone knows everyone else's business. A stranger arriving in town instantly stands out, therefore keeping a sudden disappearance quiet should basically be impossible. You know, Keith Reinhardt was 50 years old when he rolled into town during the spring of 1988. Back home, he worked as a sports writer for the Daily Herald out of Algonquin, Illinois. He was a seasoned professional, a married man holed down a stable career, yet he had abruptly taken a 90-day leave of absence from that established life. Friends often described Reinhardt as a bit of a free spirit, someone who occasionally just needed open space. He apparently found something deeply resonant up in those mountains, something he could not locate anywhere else in the world. So Reinhardt set himself up in the drafty back quarters of an abandoned Catholic church positioned right on the edge of town. To cover his daily expenses, he sold matted photographs. More importantly, he was actively writing a novel. The subject of that novel was Tom Young. Young previously operated a bookstore in Silver Plume before he vanished without warning in September 1988. Less than a full year prior to Reinhardt's arrival, searchers eventually found Young's decomposed body, along with the remains of his dog, in July 1988 just outside the town limits. Both man and animal had been shot directly in the head. Officially, authorities ruled Young's death a suicide. The dog's execution, however, was never adequately explained. Nobody has ever publicly accounted for why a suicidal man would execute his own pet first, nor has anyone adequately explained how that official ruling actually stood without further scrutiny. Reinhardt was literally working right out of Young's former storefront upon arriving in Silver Plume. He developed a deep fascination with Young's bizarre story, interested enough to construct an entire fictionalized narrative around the tragedy. Then, exactly 1 week after police recovered Young's body, everything changed. On August 7, 1988, Keith Reinhardt left for a hike. He explicitly told locals he was heading toward the summit of Pendleton Mountain. That specific trail aggressively climbed south of Interstate Fendi into steep, densely forested terrain well above the tree line. He wore entirely casual clothing for the trek, gym shoes, not rugged hiking boots. He carried absolutely no survival gear or two-way radio. Basically no equipment beyond what a person might bring on a brief, warm-weather stroll. He fully expected to return by dinner. He did not come back. The rescue search commencing on August 8th was massive. Authorities deployed hundreds of eager volunteers, alongside professional trackers across the brutal terrain surrounding Silver Plume and the Pendleton Mountain corridor. Helicopters and air resources were called in. Ground teams meticulously worked the treacherous slopes, utilizing highly organized grids. By the time officials suspended the active search on August 14th, crews had logged over 10,000 man-hours. I mean, that is not a small token search effort. That represents one of the most intensive, comprehensive rescue operations a missing persons case could ever possibly receive. Yet they found absolutely nothing. Not a torn piece of clothing, not a single misplaced footprint extending beyond the initial trailhead. They discovered no physical object whatsoever that could be definitively linked to Keith Reinhardt. During a massive search operation covering 10,000 man-hours of terrain inside a highly concentrated mountain valley, there was no physical trace. Zero. Now this is exactly where the entire case turns extraordinarily dark, because here is the chilling reality you have to hold in your mind all at once. Two men connected to the exact same commercial storefront in a tiny town boasting a population under 200 people mysteriously vanished or died in back-to-back years. Young's body turns up shot in the head. Suicide, they say, accompanied by an entirely unexplained second death, his loyal dog lying right alongside him. Then Reinhardt inexplicably disappears. 1 week after Young's corpse is finally discovered, all while he is actively writing a novel about Young's initial disappearance. And Reinhardt leaves no physical trace whatsoever despite a search operation that completely dwarfs what most missing person cases ever receive. Right, the timing is the deeply unsettling part. 1 single week. Young's remains are discovered in July 1988. Reinhardt is subsequently gone by August 7th. Whether that incredibly tight time frame actually means anything, or whether these two bizarre cases are genuinely connected in any tangible way, remains officially unknown. The Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office still currently classifies the Reinhardt disappearance as an open case. In 1990, the television program Unsolved Mysteries aired a full broadcast covering both Young and Reinhardt. It generated 0 confirmed leads. Keith Reinhardt has never been located. No skeletal remains, no discarded gear, no logical explanation. A man wearing casual gym shoes embarking on a brief day hike in a small valley simply ceased to exist, surrounded by hundreds of people who were actively looking for him within 24 hours. Years later, his son hiked up and placed a memorial plaque somewhere hidden within the sprawling Rocky Mountains. The bronze inscription features his father's own poetic words: "I want to wander till I die with the mountains as my living room, my only roof the sky." That manuscript Keith Reinhardt was writing about calm Young, the local man who originally disappeared from Silver Plume. The man whose body came back bearing a fatal gunshot wound, whose dog came back shot right alongside him. Well, that novel was never finished. It sits abandoned and incomplete somewhere in a dusty file, if it even still exists at all today. A haunting story about a man who vanished. Written by a man who vanished in the very same town. From the exact same storefront. Exactly 1 year apart. In the morning of February 10th, 1981, 17-year-old Roger Ellison arrived at Cedar Edge High School in Colorado. Basically, Roger was an exceptional kid. A straight-A honor student, holds a completely perfect attendance record, popular, well-liked by his peers. Actually, he had already been accepted to Western State College in Gunnison, right? He had even gone ahead and put down a deposit on the dorm room for the upcoming fall semester. Beyond academics, Roger possessed immense talent on the slopes. A highly skilled skier associated with the Powderhorn Racing Club, competing frequently in various weekend ski meets. He was actively working to attain a level racer's status with the United States Ski Association. You know, his sister Becky had once been a prominent member of the U.S. ski team, nearly qualifying for the Olympics. Roger was hoping to follow directly in her footsteps. He had already paid the entry fee to compete in an Aspen ski race scheduled for that very coming weekend. looking forward to it immensely. So riding the school bus to Cedar Edge High School exactly as usual on the morning of February 10th, Roger arrived around 8 o'clock in the morning. A friend named Mitch Coleman shared a basement locker with him. Locker number 191, Mitch clearly saw Roger that morning, placing some heavy books into their shared space. He seemed completely normal. He appeared happy. I mean, there was absolutely nothing unusual about his behavior at all. Just a typical teenager getting ready for the day. Roger told Mitch he would see him in class. He never made it to class, vanished, never seen again. Failing to return home that evening caused immediate panic. His parents anxiously waited up all night for him. By the next morning, they called the Delta County Sheriff's Office to officially report him missing. The Sheriff's Office pushed back, unfortunately. They told the family they could not file a formal missing person report until Roger had been gone for at least 48 hours. Dismissing the severity of the situation, they said Roger had likely just run off with a girlfriend and would be back soon. Well, Roger did not have a girlfriend at that time. Something of a loner, actually, with absolutely zero history of running away from home. His parents refused to believe he had disappeared voluntarily, leaving behind everything of value. His car, his motorcycle, his ski. For an avid, passionate skier like Roger, abandoning those skis was simply unthinkable. Sitting untouched in his bank account was $1,000. The only possessions he had on his person when he disappeared were his wallet containing just $3 for lunch money and a yellow backpack he used for carrying his school books. Desperate for answers, the family offered a massive $10,000 reward for any information, spending countless agonizing hours driving all around the state looking for hitchhikers who might resemble Roger, attending local ski meets on the desperate off chance that Roger might inexplicably show up there. When Cedar Edge High School's graduation ceremony finally took place in May of that year, one of Roger's heartbroken classmates accepted his diploma on his behalf. Tragedy struck again 6 months after Roger's disappearance. Ernest, Roger's father, man who already had a history of severe heart problems, experienced a fatal stroke at the age of 58. Prior to this devastating event, Ernest had spent every single afternoon standing out of the curb outside his residence, staring down the street, waiting for the school bus to arrive, hoping beyond hope that his son would be dropped off. When Roger never showed up, Ernest would just hang his head and cry. Like everyone in the community fully believed that the whole situation caused Ernest to literally die of or broken heart. Shortly after Ernest's passing, a man named John Pash contacted Evelyn. Pash had been Roger's social studies teacher at Cedar Edge High School. He also worked as a wrestling coach. According to Evelyn's account, Pash simply showed up at a residence out of the blue, telling her that prior to his disappearance, Roger had been experiencing a bumper of severe personal problems. He blatantly said Roger was feeling like he wanted to end his own life. Pash's house was located right next door to Cedar Edge High School, separated only by a low 3-foot-high rock wall, claiming that Roger would frequently come over to his house in order to turn in his homework early so he could get time off to go skiing. Pash painted a disturbing picture. He allegedly told Evelyn that Roger would show up late at night to seek private counseling from him because of these dark personal problems. Evelyn struggled. She had a very hard time believing Pash's shocking claims that her son wanted to harm himself. Roger's skiing coach completely contradicted Pash's dark story. Having seen Roger the weekend right before his disappearance, the coach insisted that Roger appeared to be in incredibly good spirits, completely focused, and looking forward to his upcoming ski meet in Aspen. Evelyn found it incredibly odd. Why would Pash not inform her, or anyone else for that matter, about Roger's supposed mental struggles until 6 full months after he originally went missing? Why wait so long? Taking these concerns seriously, investigators addressed the suspicion surrounding Pash by performing a thorough search of his residence. No evidence could be found. Eventually, Pash would sell his house and permanently move away to California in 1985. Struggling with profound depression and a deteriorating heart condition. Evelyn spent the very last years of her life in quiet mourning. On February 9, 1999, just one single day before the tragic 11-year anniversary of Roger's disappearance, she passed away at the age of 70. Right before her death, Delta County Sheriff Bill Blair made a solemn promise to Evelyn, swearing that he would absolutely not give up his pursuit of finding out what happened to her son. Fast forward to March of 1994. The Delta County Sheriff's Office received a highly unusual tip from one of Roger's former classmates, claiming that shortly after Roger went missing, he had explicitly seen Pash digging deep in his yard. When the student asked what he was doing out there, Pash casually said that he was transplanting roses. The student found this deeply odd. It was still the dead of winter, certainly not the ordinary expected time of year for outdoor gardening. By this point in time, Pash had already sold his house to the Delta County coroner. The coroner had since turned the property into a functioning mortuary. Securing official permission to perform a dig, the sheriff's office took action. Teaming up with the specialized grave investigation team called NecroSearch International, they brought in ground-penetrating radar, detecting 4 distinct anomalies in the yard and 2 troubling anomalies underneath a concrete floor in the garage. A heavy backhoe was used to aggressively excavate a section of the yard, but no evidence was found. Ultimately, a controversial decision was made not to dig up the garage. Then in June of 1998, a dying man made sudden contact with investigators from the Delta County Sheriff's Office, wanting to make a deathbed confession to finally clear his guilty conscience. According to this specific witness, back in the early spring of 1981, he had been out illegally poaching for deer alongside another man in a dense forest located northwest of Cedar Edge. He said they accidentally came across a terrified young man, hands tied tight with a white cord, held at gunpoint by another unknown man. Shortly after the 2 poachers cowardly fled the scene, they heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots. Looking through a police photo lineup, the witness picked out Roger, identifying him as the bound young man he saw in those woods. After willingly agreeing to take a polygraph test, he passed without issue. Tracking down the second poacher who had allegedly witnessed this chilling event, investigators soon spoke to him. He corroborated the dying witness's story completely. A massive physical search was performed in the remote wooded area where this violent incident supposedly took place. However, it failed to turn up any human remains or tangible physical evidence to suggest that foul play had genuinely taken place there. It has been publicly stated that both witnesses confidently identified Roger's armed captor as a man who had since left the state of Colorado. Investigators have never officially confirmed his true identity. Years later, one specific investigator floated a completely different theory, publicly stating that Roger's disappearance might have been over a bad cocaine deal, suggesting that Roger had absconded with illegal money and given it directly to his friends. Roger's family vehemently denied this, having absolutely no knowledge of Roger ever being involved in the drug trade. Honestly, there is zero hard evidence to support this wild theory. Adding to the confusion, it has also been reported that Roger was seen standing outside Cedar Edge High School with 2 older, totally unidentified men. Either the week right before he went missing or on the very same morning, he permanently vanished. In 2010, Cedar Edge High School underwent an extensive floor-to-ceiling renovation in order to transition the building into an elementary school, offering a glimmer of hope. Hope that tearing down walls might finally unearth new evidence to shed light on exactly what happened to Roger. Nothing was found. After more than 44 long, painful years, we still have absolutely no conclusive answers about what actually happened to Roger Ellison. Passing away without ever knowing what happened to their son, both of his parents went to their graves with broken hearts. Roger Ellison simply vanished from his high school in the middle of the bright day. No one knows why. If you have any information whatsoever about Roger Ellison's tragic disappearance, please contact the Delta County Sheriff's Office. September 28, 2022. We are in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado, while the North Inlet Trailhead sits right on the western edge of the park, just outside Grand Lake. It's the exact point where the asphalt ends, where the paved road simply stops, and the brutal backcountry begins in earnest. Basically, it is not a trailhead for anyone who is uncertain about what they are walking into. The terrain from that starting point climbs steadily eastward. It forces you through dense, subalpine forest, pushes past the tree line into the raw open tundra, and then it commits fully to the exposed high country. This is where the Continental Divide runs like a jagged spine along the park's central interior. At that elevation, way above 12,000 feet, the landscape changes its terms completely. The trail markers thin out. They vanish. The wind is constant, absolute. The distance between a manageable afternoon and a life-threatening situation, it compresses to the exact width of a moving weather front, right? An experienced mountaineer named Chad Palanche understood this reality. He was 49 years old, came from Fort Collins, and was a seasoned trail runner with extensive marathon experience. He also had a documented history of navigating technical, punishing routes across Colorado's high country. The plan he mapped out for September 28 was ambitious to say the least. a 28-mile trek from west to east. He was going from the North Inlet trailhead all the way to the Bear Lake area, crossing directly over the Continental Divide through the park's isolated interior. He had not actually run this specific route before, but the individual components, specific trail systems, the harsh terrain types, the divide crossing itself, were well within the range of what a runner of his background and elite fitness would approach as a serious, achievable objective. He wasn't underprepared. He wasn't being reckless. He was just attempting something incredibly hard. So he parked his vehicle at the North Inlet trailhead and set out alone into the park. The first digital footprint, a text message, came from near Mount Alice. Now, Mount Alice sits deep within the Wild Basin section of the park's southern interior at just over 13,000 feet, way 8, far above the tree line in that completely exposed high country. This is where the route would force him across its most brutal terrain before he could even begin the long descent toward the eastern side. But that text placed Palanche alive. He was moving at a highly specific location. He was en route. He was making progress. The second text came later. It placed him approximately 7 miles from the Bear Lake area on the east side, final stretch of the grueling route, the closing segment right before his final endpoint. And after that second text, there was nothing. Complete silence. He did not arrive at Bear Lake. His vehicle remained abandoned back at the North Inlet trailhead. Family contact was made. Park ranger were immediately notified. The search began. The resources assembled by authorities were modern, vast, and substantial. Air reconnaissance crews flew the narrow corridor between Mount Alice, the divide crossing, and the Bear Lake approach. This was the defined zone that those two text messages had bracketed. Drones covered hazardous sections that traditional fixed-wing aircraft simply could not examine at low altitudes. High-tech heat-sensing technology was deployed across the high country, desperately looking for a living person, or potentially for remains in a rugged terrain where a body, clad in dark running clothes, could be totally invisible to a standard visual search. Specialized dog teams were placed at multiple trailhead access points along the road network, while ground teams worked the sections of the trail system that remained accessible from the eastern side. Then the weather changed the calculation entirely. You see, late September in the Colorado high country operates strictly on its own chaotic schedule, and that schedule does not accommodate search operations. Heavy snow arrived across the park's upper elevations right within the active search window, and we aren't talking about a light dusting here. This was real, blinding accumulation. The kind of weather that immediately closes exposed terrain to foot travel above the tree line. Ground operations above that threshold became dangerous, and then completely impossible as conditions deteriorated. The search shifted to an aerial-only operation. The terrain had officially shut down for foot teams. The exact same weather front that may have caught Palanche on or after the divide crossing was now actively, relentlessly working against every single effort to find him. Actually, here is the critical detail that makes this specific case completely distinct from a simple bad weather accident. The two text messages Palanche sent provided something that the vast majority of backcountry disappearances never offer. Confirmed location data at two distinct points along a defined route. Text number 1, near Mount Alice. Text number 2, exactly 7 miles from Bear Lake. Think about that. That is not a missing person lost somewhere in 415 square miles of rugged national park. That is a missing person trapped within a narrow corridor that can be drawn on a map with reasonable confidence. Advanced heat-sensing aerial surveillance flew that exact corridor while conditions still permitted flight. It found absolutely nothing. Now hold that stark reality against what the technology was actually looking for. Heat-sensing aerial surveillance in late September, right before significant snowfall, has completely buried the alpine landscape, is looking for thermal contrast, a warm signature standing out against freezing cold ground, and even the residual heat pattern of a body that has been in place for hours or days in a terrain with limited wildlife interference. At that extreme elevation and season, the thermal signal should be relatively clean, right? The corridor was defined, the technology was deployed. The result was completely empty. The most logical explanation for that baffling outcome, and remember it remains a theory, not a confirmed finding, is that Palanche entered terrain far off the primary route corridor at some point after sending that second text, winding up in a location that placed him entirely outside the search zone that the text had defined. The divide crossing and the steep descent from it toward Bear Lake involve sections of treacherous loose rock, vertical couloirs, and uneven technical ground. Those are environments that lightweight trail running shoes navigate very differently than heavy mountaineering boots. A sudden fall in that terrain, a severely twisted ankle, a rock slide shifting underfoot, or a simple slip on frost-covered rock in deteriorating conditions could produce an acute injury, an injury that stops forward movement entirely. And at that altitude, overnight exposure without shelter is simply not survivable. Or perhaps the severe weather arrived much faster than the timeline suggests, catching him completely exposed on the open ridgeline before he could descend to sheltered forest terrain. Late September on the Continental Divide in Rocky Mountain National Park is a place where temperatures can plummet 30 degrees in under 2 hours, and howling wind can make standing upright nearly impossible. A trail runner moving at a fast pace generates immense body heat, heat that easily masks the early insidious stages of hypothermia until forward movement completely stops. When it stops, well, the math changes very quickly. What exactly happened to Chad Palanche in the hours following his second text remains completely unknown. The corridor between that final confirmed location and his intended endpoint at Bear Lake holds the answer. It is a specific, finite piece of geography, not infinite, and certainly not unknowable in principle. But in practice, the brutal winter that immediately followed the active search closed it off entirely. Rocky Mountain National Park received a staggering 13 feet of snow in the season that followed September 28, 2023. The high country above the tree line, that divide crossing, the steep couloirs on the eastern descent, and the exposed tundra sections of the route, all went deep under that massive accumulation. They stayed under it through the dead of winter. Whatever the terrain holds from that fateful afternoon, it held it tight through 13 feet of packed snow and an entire punishing Colorado winter. His vehicle remained parked at the North Inlet trailhead throughout of it, a silent marker. Meanwhile, on the eastern side of the park, the Bear Lake area continued operating completely normally. The winter crowds, the snowshoe rentals, the families photographing the frozen alpine lake, all of it happening just 7 miles away on the other side of the divide. Somewhere in that quiet corridor between Mount Alice and that final endpoint, the last chapter of Chad Palanche's story sits in a terrain that has not yet chosen to reveal it. Whether his remains have been located in the time since the initial search is not confirmed in publicly available reporting, as of our most recent research. The case is recent enough that the answer to that question may well have changed. What is certain, however, is that a 49-year-old, highly experienced trail runner sent 2 texts from inside a tightly defined route corridor, then went completely silent, and every single piece of modern search technology deployed in that critical window before the weather closed to the high country came back with absolutely nothing. So let us go back to the beginning. February 1st, 2011. Pueblo, Colorado. Well, the day had actually started out remarkably well, you know. Kelsey Jean Schelling was 21 years old, living net in Denver, and she was working her regular job at a floor and decor store over in Highlands Ranch. Yes, she had gone to the doctor that exact morning for her very first prenatal appointment. 8 weeks pregnant. The ultrasound completely confirmed it, so she sent the picture directly to her family, her mother, her stepfather, people who were, already planning their entire lives around this new baby. They were already building towards September when the due date was officially set. By every single account of that morning, Kelsey was in incredibly good spirits. She was proud, looking forward. After her appointment, she just went straight to work. She clocked out at exactly 9:54 in the evening. Then, she got into her black 2011 Chevrolet Cruze and drove south on Interstate 25, an agonizingly long 2 hours down the dark highway toward Pueblo to see Dante Lucas. Lucas was her on-again, off-again boyfriend, the actual father of the child she was carrying. The relationship was complicated in ways her family understood only in fragmented pieces. He was not happy about the pregnancy. She had told several people. Sometimes he threatened to take the baby right from her. Other times, things seemed fine. She had confided these deeply personal things to people close to her, but, she drove south anyway because that is basic what you do when you are 21 and pregnant and desperately trying to hold something together that keeps completely slipping out of your grasp. So she arrived at the Walmart in Northern Avenue in Pueblo shortly after 11 at night. She texted Lucas from the empty parking lot. She was there, waiting. Around 11:45, she texted him again. She was exhausted and tired of waiting around. He texted back and told her to come to a street near his grandmother's house instead. That is the final confirmed text ever sent from Kelsey Schelling's own phone. The next morning, February 5th, her phone just went straight to voicemail, dead air. Her family called, they kept calling. Her mother, Laura Saxton, simply could not reach her. By the 7th, which was exactly 3 days after Kelsey had driven south, the very first physical evidence surfaced. And honestly, it immediately made absolutely no sense. Surveillance footage actually captured Kelsey's black Chevy Cruze being picked up from the Walmart parking lot at 7:20 in the morning. The driver was an unknown male wearing a heavy hooded sweatshirt and thick gloves, his face hidden behind dark sunglasses. At 5:30 that exact same morning, before the car was even picked up from Walmart, it had already been dropped off at St. Mary Corwin Medical Center down in southern Pueblo. Surveillance showed a driver pulling it into the lot, locking it, walking away. When the car was eventually processed by investigators, several strange specific items were missing: a black rosary, a metal sign that read love, a tie-dyed teddy bear, and the physical keys. The phone charger was still sitting right there. Her wallet was still there, untouched. Her clothes were entirely untouched back in the apartment in Denver. Here is the truly critical detail. The exact same day the car surfaced, someone actually used Kelsey's debit card at an ATM in Pueblo and boldly withdrew $500. When investigator finally pulled the ATM surveillance, the face glaring back on the grainy footage was Dante Lucas. Lucas was quickly arrested on identity theft charges. Those charges were eventually dropped. His story about what had happened the night of February 4th changed with nearly every single interview he gave to police. Sometimes he said they had met around midnight. Other times he said closer to 2 in the morning. Sometimes he said they argued aggressively in her car in the Walmart parking lot before she just drove away into the night. Sometimes he claimed they went directly to his grandmother's house first. The timeline constantly shifted. The exact location of their last interaction changed entirely. Details bled into one another. But in every single version he told, Kelsey left entirely on her own, and he had absolutely nothing to do with whatever came next, right? Her phone battery completely died on February 7th. After that point, there was zero activity on her bank accounts, no movement whatsoever on her social media, and absolutely no contact with anyone. She had left her apartment in Denver exactly as it was, nothing packed, nothing removed. There was no indication at all she had planned to go anywhere beyond a single, simple overnight visit down to Pueblo. Kelsey Schelling was never seen again. The investigation that followed moved agonizingly slowly, far too slowly according to Kelsey's devastated family. The Pueblo Police Department was the lead agency, and in those painful early weeks the response just felt entirely inadequate to the people who truly loved her. Laura Saxton described walking nearly every single street in Pueblo herself in those first months, physically covering ground on foot because she simply did not trust that it was being covered in any other meaningful way. She organized search efforts. She talked to anyone who would listen to her pleas. She kept the case highly visible at a time when it would have been incredibly easy for it to slip quietly into the massive backlog of missing persons files that agencies constantly carry and rarely revisit. In 2015, the family filed a civil lawsuit against Dante Lucas, members of his immediate family, and the Pueblo Police Department, directly citing the controversial way the early investigation had been handled. The lawsuit contained fragmented pieces of the official police record, text messages between Kelsey and Lucas in the days right before she drove south, details about the various welfare checks officers had conducted, and timelines intricately reconstructed from cellular phone data. It was basically one of the only public documents that gave the public any real window into what investigators actually knew at the time. The suit was later dropped, but not before it had put certain alarming facts into the public record that the department had not released on its own. One of those strange details came from a co-worker of Kelsey's at the Florin Decor store. About 6 months before Kelsey disappeared, she had abruptly failed to show up for a scheduled shift. When her colleagues finally managed to reach her, she told them she could not come in because she had deep bruises on her neck. She said her father had strangled her. Investigators thoroughly looked into it. Her father, Doug Schelling, vehemently denied it, and they were able to confirm through solid evidence he had been hours away at the time of the alleged violent incident. He was totally ruled out. But that left a glaring, open question that was never publicly answered by anyone. If Doug Schelling did not cause those brutal bruises, who did? The true source of the horrific neck injuries Kelsey described to her co-worker 6 months before she vanished remains officially unknown. In December 2017, 4 years and 10 long months after Kelsey Schelling drove down to Pueblo and never came home, Dante Lucas was arrested for her murder. He was actually already in custody at the Pueblo County Detention Center on an entirely unrelated aggravated robbery charge when detectives served the new warrant. The Pueblo Police Department stated that the arrest was the direct result of complex evidence accumulated over nearly 5 years of continuous investigation, and that her body had not been found. They did not release the specific details of what that compelling evidence actually was. Lucas was formally charged with first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty. The trial finally proceeded in early 2021. The lead Colorado Bureau of Investigation investigator who had deeply worked the case testified that in his professional assessment, Kelsey had been strangled, a method that would perfectly explain why no murder weapon was ever recovered and why absolutely no blood evidence had been found at any location connected to Lucas. The prosecution's main theory was that Lucas had intentionally lured Kelsey to Pueblo with the dark intention of killing her, knowing all about the pregnancy and completely unwilling to be bound to it forever. The bizarre car staging at St. Mary Corwin Hospital, driven there by an unidentified male long before it was picked up from Walmart, heavily suggested that at least one other person may have been involved in the dark hours after Kelsey's death, though the identity of that shadowy individual has never been publicly confirmed. In March 2021, Dante Lucas was convicted of first-degree murder, and as the strict sentence was mandatory, he received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kelsey's mother stood tall in that courtroom and finally received the outcome she had spent 8 exhausting years working toward, but it was not what she had truly wanted. What she had wanted was her daughter, because, well, here's the terrible thing. The conviction did not change the painful fact that Kelsey Schelling's body has never been found. Searches of multiple properties connected to Lucas, including a massive excavation of the backyard of a home he had previously lived at, an expensive operation that involved heavy industrial equipment and the complete removal of a large tree, produced absolutely no human remains. A search of a nearby open field produced no remains. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation eventually joined the massive effort, and even the Federal Bureau of Investigation threw heavy resources at the case. Across so many years of intense investigation, with a convicted murderer who undoubtedly knows the answers sitting rotting in a prison cell, no one has found Kelsey. Her mother, Laura Saxton, used the crushing grief of that tragic fact to build something lasting. She created Colorado Missing Persons Day, an annual recognition of families still desperately waiting for answers, still searching, families carrying the unbelievable weight of a case that technically has a legal verdict but still has no ending. The bench at Pueblo City Park near the playground has Kelsey's name carved right on it. Laura Saxton has said she simply cannot have true closure, not without knowing exactly where her daughter is. Dante Lucas is sitting in a maximum security prison for the rest of his natural life. He knows where Kelsey Schelling is. On June 21, 2004, a 54-year-old man named Eugene Fish, known affectionately as Gene to his close friends and family, completely disappeared from his private residence located in rural Cannon City, Colorado. Gene actually had an incredibly impressive, extensive professional career. First, he served his country honorably in the United States Air Force. Then he worked directly with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS. After that chapter of his life closed, he worked alongside the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, specifically focusing on Cold War-era nuclear disarmament efforts taking place between the United States and Russia. When he officially retired in the year 2002, he secured a substantial pension of over $3,000 a month. Gene and his wife Lynn had been legally married since 1997. Upon his retirement, they relocated to Colorado and purchased a very remote 35-acre piece of property situated right near the Royal Gorge Bridge. They constructed a modular home right there on the land. But things behind closed doors weren't exactly perfect. In late 2003, Lynn confided in a construction worker that Gene had physically beaten her and actually knocked out one of her teeth, though she didn't report this alleged abuse to the police. In January of 2004, she did call the local sheriff regarding a physical shoving incident, but ultimately declined to file any formal legal complaint. Now, if we are going basically according to Lynn's official story, on June 21, Gene abruptly left their shared home following a heated argument. She stated he was incredibly angry. She claimed he violently smashed his personal computer and his cell phone and then proceeded to cut up his own credit cards. He supposedly told her he wanted to travel to Mexico or South America and completely disappear. Gene then drove away in his red Ford F-150 pickup truck. Lynn claimed he told her he would send that truck back at a later time, and like the truck actually did come back. On June 23, just 2 days after his supposed departure, it mysteriously appeared parked in their driveway situated 3 miles deep inside the locked property gate. So if Gene personally drove the truck back to the house, how exactly did he leave the property? Did he walk 3 miles on foot through the rugged terrain of rural Colorado, or did someone else follow him up there? Strangely, Lynn waited 8 full days before informing anyone at all that Jean was missing. She finally placed a call to Jean's elderly father, Bill, on the 29th of June. Bill was immediately deeply concerned. You see, Jean called his parents every single Sunday without fail to speak with his mother, who suffered from Alzheimer's disease. Jean absolutely never missed these important weekly calls, but he had suddenly missed 2 consecutive Sundays with absolutely no word. I mean, Bill simply didn't buy Lynn's version of events. Lynn never officially reported Jean missing to the authorities herself. Instead, Jean's longtime friend Chuck, who happened to be an active police officer based in New York, officially filed the missing persons report on September 1. That was more than 2 whole months later. When investigators finally started thoroughly looking into the case, they found Jean hadn't accessed his pension funds at all, but Lynn was now actively collecting that money. By the month of August, Lynn had successfully switched of their joint bank accounts into her name only. Jean hadn't used any of his credit cards, his personal passport, or any distinct bank accounts. He left behind his car, his motorcycle, his ski, and an extensive valuable gun collection. Then, Lynn's story started drastically changing. First, she told police someone smashed the CB radio located inside Jean's truck. Then she later stated the truck never even had a CB radio to begin with. She claimed there was only one single key associated with the truck. Then she admitted she used spare keys found inside the house. She initially said Jean took $8,000 in cash, then revised it to $8,500, then $20,000, and finally settled to $25,000. The local trash hauler reported that nobody put any smashed electronics into the dumpster like Lynn had explicitly claimed, but he did distinctly remember finding a blue canvas bag filled with empty gun holsters. Lynn told a nearby neighbor she was far too scared to ever touch Jean's firearms, but Jean had previously told his father he had specifically bought Lynn her very own gun and personally taught her how to shoot it. When a hired contractor asked Lynn about Jean's whereabouts, she casually said he went back to New York. Later, she told a neighbor she completely lied about that, claiming she was simply too ashamed to admit Jean had permanently left her. Then there is the bizarre issue of the mattress. In July of 2000, Lynn purchased a brand new mattress. It was just a mattress, absolutely no accompanying box spring. The local trash company stated definitively that no old mattress was ever thrown away or collected from the property. The furniture delivery company confirmed they didn't take away an old one either, so where exactly did it go? Investigator formally asked Lynn to take a polygraph examination. She initially agreed, but then completely refused to follow through. In 2000, Jean's parents filed a formal wrongful death lawsuit against Lynn and a neighbor who worked professionally as a back cooperator. They legally alleged Lynn ended Jean's life, and that the neighbor actively helped bury his remains. Unfortunately, the lawsuit was dismissed when Jean's father tragically passed away at the age of 90. But right before he died, he established a dedicated trust fund to continuously finance the ongoing search for his son. Jean's mother passed away in 2009. Jean was designated as the sole heir to the entire estate, worth basic $500,000. But Jean has never been found to rightfully claim it. 20 years later, his substantial monthly pension continues to be collected by his wife. If you happen to have any credible information regarding Eugene Fish's disappearance, please immediately contact the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. February 10th, 1983, Cameron Pass, Colorado. The pass sits at an elevation of 10,276 feet right on the northern edge of Rocky Mountain National Park. Up there, the winding road climbs straight through the Medicine Battle Mountains. The wind, it comes off those high peaks in heavy, relentless waves. In February, this is absolutely not a place that forgives mistakes. You know, the winter snowpack is extremely deep. Slopes are intensely steep. The terrain above the tree line shifts constantly. You are dealing with unpredictable avalanche chutes and these wind-scoured ridge lines that basically look stable until the exact second they are not. Rudy Motter knew all of this. Right. That is actually the specific detail making his disappearance so difficult to explain away. Motter was 25 years old, a seasoned ski mountaineer hailing from West Germany. He traveled to Colorado specifically to challenge the backcountry. This guy was highly experienced. We are not talking about a casual tourist wandering off some clearly marked room trail. He was someone who completely understood high-altitude winter terrain. He possessed the distinct physical skills to operate safely inside it. So he left a detailed trip plan. He definitely had a precise route in mind. Setting out from Cameron Pass entirely alone on February 13, he did not come back. When he failed to return to his parked vehicle, authorities immediately launched a massive search. Rangers pushed deep into the rugged terrain above the pass. Rescue teams followed right behind them. The conditions up there in late February were exactly what they always are at that brutal elevation. Punishing. Deep snow, severely limited visibility, massive avalanche risk of the steeper mountain faces. Search teams found absolutely no tracks beyond a certain point. No discarded equipment, no torn clothing. There was zero sign of Mater anywhere. At some point, they had to make the difficult call to suspend the search. He was presumed dead. The missing persons case got filed away. They officially notified the German government, and then 37 years passed. 37 long, quiet years of summers and winters cycling relentlessly through Rocky Mountain National Park. Millions of eager visitors came and went. Seasonal ranger patrols hiked the immediate area. Trail crews heavily worked those backcountry routes every single year. When the snow melted each spring, the Rudi Mater case essentially stayed open. Officially, the German government had never actually closed it, but nothing ever surfaced. No stray hikers stumbled across a random piece of his equipment. No intense snowmelt season revealed anything hidden on the steep slopes above Cameron Pass. For nearly 4 decades, the mountain kept him completely. Here is the critical defining detail. In August 2020, park rangers discovered skeletal remains. They were located in the exact general search zone where teams had originally looked back in 1910. Alongside the exposed remains sat his ski, poles, boots, along with a few personal items. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was officially brought in to assist with the formal identification process. Once again, they notified the German government. Only this time, they came with an actual concrete answer. The remains were definitively confirmed as Rudi Mater's. Like the official position on his cause of death is that he likely died from exposure or a tragic fall. That position remains formally unconfirmed, meaning no definitive medical determination has been publicly released. What the unforgiving terrain strongly suggests, however, is simply this. Cameron Pass in February. Solo above the barren tree line on steep slopes. The most probable explanation is that he was caught in something sudden. A massive slide. A violent fall, perhaps resulting in an injury he simply could not recover from. The dense snowpack buried him in a location just slightly outside the main grid of the 1980 FEE search corridor. They had been able to cover a massive area, but here is what does not make any logical sense. The zone where his remains were finally found had been searched during the original operation. Note just nearby. The exact same geographic zone, which means either the 1980 FEE search simply missed something in those chaotic conditions, or Mater's remains were situated in a location completely inaccessible at the time. Possibly buried deep under several feet of packed snow that did not give him up until decades of shifting freeze-thaw cycles finally altered the terrain enough to expose what was left. 30-some years. You know, the park was never closed to the public. It was never restricted. Countless people skied those exact same slopes. Hikers heavily worked those drainages every single summer. And Rudi Mater just sat frozen in the very same mountain the whole time, invisible, waiting. This case is technically resolved now. He has been identified. His grieving family back in Germany after nearly 4 decades of waiting finally received confirmation of what they had probably known for a really long time. But the exact circumstances, how a 29-year-old highly experienced mountaineer died on a known route inside a crowded park full of people who never found a single trace of him for 30-some years, that remains officially unknown. Well, the mountain kept its dark secret for longer than most people would ever believe logically possible. It only gave it up by pure random accident when a ranger happened to be standing in the exact right drainage at the perfect time of year. That is the true harsh nature of the Colorado backcountry. It does not actively hide things on purpose. It just does not feel any particular obligation to ever give them back to us. Well, on March 31st, 1983, 22-year-old Pamela Neal left work for her lunch break in Englewood, Colorado. It was right at 2 p.m. She worked as a bank teller at Key Savings and Loan. Actually, her apartment sat directly across the street. Just a remarkably short walk. She walked 2 blocks to another bank to cash a check. Next, she stopped at a grocery store. She bought a lottery ticket and picked up some takeout food. Then she headed straight back to her apartment. Basically, she planned to eat a quiet lunch at home before returning for her afternoon shift. A completely normal routine. Pamela never made it back to work. When her roommate arrived home later that day, a truly chilling scene awaited. Pamela's lunch bag sat untouched on the table. Her shoes rested quietly under the coffee table. She had clearly kicked them off to relax. Nearby lay her purse tucked inside were her wallet and that unscratched lottery ticket. And the front door left standing wide open, ajar. So what actually happened in those brief moments? Did Pamela get home, kick off her shoes, and prepare to eat when someone suddenly knocked? Did a frantic neighbor claim they had an emergency? Like, did a total stranger follow her home and force their way inside right behind her? I mean, did she accidentally leave the door unlocked for someone to just walk right in? Or was an intruder already hiding inside the apartment waiting for her to arrive? We simply lacked the facts to say for sure. Pamela lived a remarkably quiet life. She strictly avoided nightclubs. She did not even own a car. She walked absolutely everywhere she needed to go. Work, as mentioned, was conveniently right across the street. Born in Denver, she graduated from Cherry Creek High School, attended Western State College, and lived in Alaska for a year. Then she stayed in Maine with her parents before eventually relocating to Inglewood to take the bank teller position. She was just 22 years old. She literally had her entire life stretching out ahead of her, and someone took that away, right? A devastating reality. The undeniable fact that her shoes were off strongly suggests she made it inside and felt entirely safe enough to get comfortable. Yet the front door being ajar points directly to her leaving in a frantic rush or being forcefully abducted. But why leave without her shoes or her wallet? She absolutely would not voluntarily. Never. Foul play is understandably heavily suspected. Over 40 years later, Pamela Neal remains missing without a single trace. Her family never got answers. They never got to bury her. They never saw any semblance of justice. If you hold any information regarding the tragic disappearance of Pamela Neal, please contact the Inglewood Police Department.